Welcome, friend. Settle in, make yourself comfortable, and let the outside world soften for a while. This is Quiet Mind Chronicles, calm history told slowly. If you enjoy drifting through the past like this, subscribe so the next journey is waiting when you return. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, what's one place in the world you'd love to see in person? I'd love to read your answers. Here, the past unfolds gently, one story at a time. Dawn lifts over tiles and smoke, and the city's first movements feel like someone clearing their throat. In the forum, a man tests a cartwheel with his heel and listens for the note that means the rim sits clean on the spokes. Up on the ridge, a surveyor sights along a staff to a boy holding a pole with cross pieces, and between those two pairs of eyes, old-young, something straight is about to be pulled across a complicated world. Rome decided early that if she wanted Italy, she would first have to want lines you can follow in fog, lines that survive a bad harvest and a worse temper, lines that let a mule know where to put its feet, and a commander where to plant his standard at dusk. Roads, then, before glory, measure before miracle. A road is an agreement with the ground. I will lay you carefully if you carry me steadily. The ground, when treated with respect, is a faithful friend. The censors are the city's poets of stone. When they let a contract for a road, they do not just say build. They specify depth before finish, a foundation of fist-sized stones, statumen, a bed of gravel and lime, rudis, beaten until it behaves like one body, a finer nucleus, and then the top, the summa crusta of polygonal blocks you can read with your feet. A road crowned to shed water, ditches to catch what is shed, shoulders for avoidance, milestones for hope. A man with no letters can count the cuts on a stone and know how far home is. A woman standing with a sleeping child under an olive can tell by the way cart iron sings whether the paving is new. If you stand by the Porta Capena and walk south with the sun on your shoulder, the world becomes a sentence. Via Appia. Appius Claudius Caecus, Appius the blind, stubborn and far-sighted at once, put it on the land in 312 BCE, the year he also brought water in secret under hills. The road ran first toward Capua, later to Brundisium, slicing marsh and rock with the same indifference, because roads cannot afford mood. It is not a gentle path, it is a useful one. Soldiers travel it. Merchants travel it. A boy with figs to sell learns the trick of stepping aside 3 beats before a wheel passes. The world begins to trust Rome because Rome starts keeping promises. We will be where this stone says we can be. Roads shrink time in a way even priests respect. A truce agreed tomorrow can be enforced the day after. A levy called this morning can stand in line at the 9th hour next to men who were strangers yesterday. A governor who writes a letter knows what day it will be read, and doubt is replaced by schedule. The Nundine rhythm, the market's soft drum, spreads into hills because carts can keep the beat. In a place that used to measure distance by danger, you begin to measure it by days. Listen also to what roads do to speech. It thickens. A Sabine word for a tool hops into a Latin mouth and becomes normal. A Campanian spice becomes a Roman habit. A cheap song from a mountain town finds its way into a legion's march and will one day be hummed without thinking by a baker kneading dough in a colony 2 weeks from the sea. Trade is traffic plus trust. Roads manufacture both. Rome's genius is not just to lay stone, but to maintain it. Contracts name men. Those names are carved where wheels polish them, and praise and shame do work no whip can do. A contractor who salts gravel learns what it is to be seen. A crew that packs joints with care learns the quiet joy of walking their own work at sunset and hearing nothing rattle. The Temple of Concord gets the songs. The Via Appia gets the footsteps, which are the real vote. From high ground, you can trace how roads lean into rivers. The river Tiber takes loads that want floating. The roads take loads that want time. Quays become hinges. Warehouses breathe. Mooring rings bite rope where barges nose in, and carriers with backs like honest arguments lift sacks to the cart bed without drama because the road is there to meet them. When evening folds over the city and lamps set long trembling ladders on the water, you can say it plainly. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight, and see the road's promise in its reflection. Tomorrow will be reachable. A road is not a straight line across emptiness. It is a braid. Soldiers, surveyors, stonecutters, muleteers, innkeepers, priests who mark days fit for opening a ditch. aediles who inspect weights at the market all those carts feed, censors who remember names. If glory ever does arrive, it rides quietly in the last cart, under sacks of grain, as a guest of logistics. When the last light leaves the Via Appia's blocks, they hold their heat and their shape. Tomorrow they will do the same. That is the kind of promise Italy learned to believe. The city remembers 312 BCE as a year with two doors. One opened where everyone could admire it, the other opened where almost no one could see. The visible door was the Via Appia. The hidden door was the Aqua Appia, the first long aqueduct sneaking water under skin of hill and field, so quietly that people had to be told it existed. Let's take the one you can't watch first. Water hates being managed in daylight. Sun warms it, thieves lighten it, cattle muddy it, and neighbors argue over it. So the censors and their engineers talked to gravity instead. They found a slope so gentle it looked like stubbornness, falling only enough to persuade, never enough to boast. They lined the conduit to keep Earth's appetite out and covered it to keep hands and heat away. Where the aqueduct crossed soft ground, it rode on subterranean vaults. Where rock cooperated, it carved through like a careful worm. Where it had to show itself, it did so briefly and with modest arches that looked more like a shrug than a triumph. At the city end, water burst into basins that made sense. Castella to divide flow, spouts set at heights, human backs like troughs for animals and laundresses, and a few private pipes for men who had names and reasons. The aediles checked purity by eye and by nosing a cup. Fines for fouling were not poetry. They were numbers that could hurt. A woman who used to lose a dim hour each day coaxing water from the hill or braving a crowded spring found that hour again, and she spent it on sleep or clean jars or teaching a child to count by the nundine. You can build a temple with good stone, and men will praise you once. You can bring water within reach, and women will praise you every time they put a pot down without wincing. Meanwhile, above ground, the other door ran south like a sentence walked into the land. Via Appia was not the first road, but it behaved as if it wanted to be the first idea. Straight where it could be, intelligent where it must bend, built deep so it did not need apologies later. The road does for distance what the aqueduct does for thirst. It makes both predictable. Traders learn to promise days instead of prayers. Relatives who used to be letters with legs become visits with gifts. A soldier who leaves a wife and a son behind does not fear his family will fade to rumor. He can count the milestones between them, the way a mother counts the steps to the spout. These gifts, stone and water, create a third, softer gift that Rome loves: habit. Habits crystallize around things that behave themselves. If grain arrives when a slate said it would, markets keep hours without resentment. If water falls from a spout with the same sound each morning, you can schedule washing, cooling dough, soaking flax, bathing a baby. Habit is how liberty enters kitchens. Appius himself is a tangle of contradictions that suit a republic finding its stride. He pushes through a speech wider enrollment in tribes, poor men and freedmen brought nearer to the political spine, and whether later hands trimmed his work or not, the stone and the water stuck. His censors' notes grew quarrels that kept later centuries warm, but the road carried carts, and the aqueduct cooled tempers long after the argument stopped producing heat. Good policy lives or dies by paper. Good infrastructure simply refuses to die. Look how both systems court maintenance. A road invites repairs by making faults visible. Loose joint, rocking stone, a puddle where crown failed. An aqueduct demands vigilance. A seep becomes a trickle, becomes a stream. A root pushes where a joint was lazy. A shepherd decides a hole is a good place to hide a bottle. Rome answers with named men, posted notices, and fines that pay for lime and labor. The censor's genius is to make titles feel like obligations. You do not just hold an office, you owe a road. Where road and water meet, cities grow. Not just Rome, but her younger selves, coloniae, laid out with the same gentle stubbornness. 2 straight streets crossing, a square, a well, hooks for official weights, an edict board in a hand children can copy. The Via Appia ties these daughters to their mother. The aqueduct teaches them to imitate her good manners. Men who once led goats now lead crews. Boys who once got lost between olive and oak now walk to a milestone and sit on it to eat a half loaf and an onion and say, "This is ours." Stand at dusk by the first stretch beyond the gate. The road's blocks hold heat and smell faintly of iron. Down in the cut, where the aqueduct passes unseen, water talks the way a careful friend talks, low, steady, happy to be useful. Above, carts rattle where joints are honest. Someone curses in a dialect the road will carry 2 days from here. A dog sleeps with its nose on its paws and does not bother to look up when strangers go by, because strangers arriving on a predictable road rarely mean trouble. The river Tiber, a little distance off, accepts water that has served and gives itself to barges that have somewhere to be, because stone tells them they can be there by this hour. Water, stone, and schedule. 3 ways of saying the same Roman prayer. Let tomorrow be like today, but a touch easier. Before a road ties places together, a camp ties people together for a night. The legion's habit of putting itself away at dusk is half of Rome's success and most of her personality. 4 gates on the cardinal winds, 2 straight streets, Cardo and Decumanus, a grid that multiplies calm. Tents where tents belong, beasts where beasts belong, a ditch that discourages both boredom and surprise. The standard planted where eyes can find it in panic. A space for cooking, a space for mending, a space for talk. If you could teach safety to geometry, it would look like this. Men are divided by use, not flattery. Hastati up front, young men with pilum and hearts that haven't yet learned to pace themselves. Principes behind, older, more expensive in kit and calm. Triaria as the hinge, the proverb's last resort, not because they are dramatic, but because they can hold the room while everyone else remembers their training. The manipular system, small units that can turn and fit, is an argument against pride. Hills do not care for great ideas, they reward adjustment. Camp laws are simple and posted, the military cousin of a city edict. Fires low, weapons clean, latrines downwind, no steel near a quarrel. Punishments are unromantic, bread and water, ditch work, worn pride. Decimation is a cautionary tale told more often than done. Ordinary discipline is 100 small choices of together over alone. A soldier learns that being useful keeps him safer than being brave. When men go home, they do not shed these habits, they seed them. A veteran lays out his vines in rows so straight visitors make jokes and then copy them next spring. He stacks wood as if inspection were coming at dawn. He paints marks on tools and hangs them where a hand that is not his can find them without asking. He trusts cues, loves posted hours, and prefers the quiet "I will" of a stipulation to the loud "you must" of a threat. Cities notice. Rome's markets begin to move like well-laid streets. Rome's streets begin to feel like a well-kept camp. The exchange cuts the other way too. Cities teach camps about comfort that isn't softness. A cloak dried near a kiln but not scorched. A stew that respects onions, a stitch that will not come apart on the 3rd mile, a damped hinge that does not shout its existence at night. These are civil inventions that keep an army angry at the right people. The aedile's obsession with clean water and offal pits maps straight on to the latrine discipline that keeps half a legion from sickness while the other half fights. Allies, soci, fold into this pattern through treaties that read like recipes. So many men, so much grain, such and such standards, your own officers under our oath. They bring songs that campfires adopt and pieces of kit that Rome copies without fuss. A better hobnail, a clever pack strap, a cart pin that doesn't shear. Identity survives, utility travels. On a levee morning you can read half of Italy in the accents at the assembly field and all of Rome in the order of the queue. When the marching ends for the day, ditches are cut, stakes are planted, and the night smells of earth and a little smoke. The watch walks in pairs. The password is a joke often enough to keep fear from making men stupid. Somewhere a scribe scratches numbers, pay, rations, spoil shares, sick list. Spoils are counted, not grabbed. Numbers are posted. Resentments reduce because arithmetic is harder to hate than a face. Cities borrow the camp's best habits. A colony laid out on a hill wears the grid like an old soldier's cloak, faded and strong. 2 straight streets meet. A forum sits where wind can clean it. A well stands where women can talk and keep an eye on each other's children. The 12 tables are copied and hung low enough for small fingers to trace. The praetor's edict is posted in a hand men can read after a day in sun. A tholos at the market shelters the scale and the gossip that keeps prices kind. Even the watch is borrowed, pairs with short spears and long ears, feet that know which board creaks, voices that can wake a neighborhood without frightening it. There's a deeper exchange under the neatness. Camps teach cities that order is a kindness. Cities teach camps that kindness is a force multiplier. A soldier who has slept well because the latrines were where they should be, and the drains did what drains do, will stand longer in a line and grumble less while he does it. A citizen who knows the watch will come if she knocks with the stick 3 times on the shutter will shop with a freer mind and spend what she might have hidden. Trust is a currency minted by procedures. At the edge of all this, the river Tiber makes itself useful again. Barges bring forward what roads cannot, salt, wood, stone, wine, and carry back what camps hate to carry, sick, letters, promises that need witnesses. Quays work like gates in a camp wall. Stairs rise and fall with season and policy. Mooring rings tell a quiet story in scars. When the island breaks the current into 2 dark lanes and the bridge prints its reflection like a seal into wax, the city looks at its own face and finds it tidy. A camp taken down in the rain leaves almost nothing behind beyond beaten earth and a few jokes that will make it into a winter market. A road left alone for a season waits with patience that has taught half of Italy to imitate it. Between the two, Rome moves forward, not fast, precisely, but on time. Italy is not a board, it is a rumpled cloak. The central backbone Apennines throws up ridges that laugh at straight lines and gullies that teach wheels humility. In these folds lived the Samnites, hill people with good lungs and longer memories, who did not think roads were invitations. They thought roads were claims. Rome called, the hills answered, and between them rose 3 wars that sharpened the city's mind more than any school. The first taught caution with a slap. Caudine Forks, 321 BCE, a defile where Roman columns walked into a pair of closed doors. They came out under yokes, stripped of armor and pride, and the shock traveled down the Via Latina and across the Via Appia like a frost that kills blossoms. The lesson was not, do not fight Samnites. It was, do not fight hills with ideas meant for fields. So Rome changed the shape of her fighting. The maniple, already a habit, became a doctrine. Smaller blocks that could pivot, climb, grip. Signals rethought, standards reposted, commanders learning to listen to ground before speaking to men. Allies were pulled closer by treaty and by stone. Roads pushed deeper into Campania and up into passes, not to strangle but to supply. Posts where fodder waited, stations where mules could be swapped, places where messages could change hands without getting lost in sentiment. Bridges became arguments that could not be yelled down. Where streams cut roads, crews laid piles into bed and stacked courses of stone tight enough that the river respected the edge. Approaches were paved wide and longer than vanity would have allowed, because a good bridge is the 50 paces before it as much as the span itself. Censors demanded names carved, and names trained hands. Pride and anxiety together are excellent quality control. The Second War taught patience. Fighting in folds means supplies decide battles you don't see. The Via Appia turned from monument to artery, grain forward, men forward, spare sandals forward, letters forward, teeth, envy, and bravado left at home. Colonies mattered more than slogans. Set a small grid on a hill, plant 200 families with plows, tools, and laws, and a year later you have a place that feeds itself and the unit next door. Teach them to mend their piece of road and to post their piece of edict, and you've turned a valley into a citizen. The Third War taught theater, a careful, useful theater, because victory wants audiences. Gaius Pontius's trap at Caudium had humiliated a republic that swore it had no king. Rome answered not by finding a hero, but by finding a method. Sieges that were circles of ditch and wall, reliefs by schedule, and pressure that ate winter without losing its teeth. When Sentinum came, 295 BCE, with enemies from more than one quarter, the maniples did precisely what they were invented for: bent, held, bit, and then pushed. And the field learned Rome could fight in more than one direction at once. What does this have to do with roads and the domestic calm we keep returning to? Everything. A road is only as useful as the policy that walks it. After the Samnite Wars, Rome's policy wore a new coat, flexible, counted, fitted to ground. Surveyors learned to dodge rock without apologizing to geometry. Quartermasters learned to value mules as much as speeches. Treaties learned to respect pride while demanding numbers. So many shields, so many carts, so much corn by the 5th day after summons. The network of obligations began to look like the grid of a colony, not rigid, but recognizable from above, with enough right angles to make movement predictable. Back in the Forum, this shift smelled like bread and sleep. Men came home from hills with lungs and manners improved. Women discovered that letters from camp arrived when slates said they would. Aediles found that carts kept hours better. Praetors heard fewer cases about ambushes disguised as contracts because the city had learned to hate surprise in every room. On the Via Latina, you could meet a Samnite family moving under a legal umbrella to a place inside Rome's net. Angry, proud, safe. A boy in that family would later make a hinge that held cart doors truer over ruts. A girl would run a stall with weights that rang pure against the aediles' pegs. Rome's greatest trick is not to win, it is to reuse. Stand where the road climbs a cut and the sky widens. Far off, the river Tiber in its lower stretches looks like a strip of dull metal, running toward the sea with the patience of an old teacher. You know that on its banks, a board lists which barges will nose in at the 3rd hour tomorrow. You know which stairs flood last. You know which rings hold best. Up here the wind smells like thyme. Down there it smells like rope. Between the two, what was a problem has become a path. Rome did not stop being surprised. She kept learning to turn surprise into procedure. The hills taught that lesson with interest. The roads carried it home. In every army story, someone waves a sword. In every true army story, someone counts sacks. Rome learned early that soldiers eat victory only after they've eaten bread. The wonder isn't that legions fought. It's that food found them where roads turned to dust and dust to rock. Begin at the levee field where kit is stacked like a paragraph. Shield, helm, pilum, sword, 2 stakes for camp palisade, mess gear, cloak, spare sandals, and the quiet load Bodhi admires, rations. Grain is the heart. Frumentum measured per man, issued by century, logged by the questor's clerks, converted by muscle and water into something that behaves on the march. Meat is a guest, not a tenant. Vinegar is the secret. Pasca, the sour drink that turns bad water into survivable water and keeps mouths honest in heat. Pack is an argument with gravity. The furca, that forked pole stabbed into the ground at halts, carries a bundle wrapped tight. Cloak outside as weather, grain in a sack tied against sweating backs, panniers for shared tools. A man who ties badly teaches himself with blisters. By the 10th day he ties like a priest. A century that packs well moves like a sentence read aloud by someone who knows where the commas belong. Where does the grain come from? From contractors hired by names on boards, men who know which hills feed which valleys and which valleys flood when a cloud is angry in the wrong direction. Censors pick them and carve names into stones. Aediles check weights at town edges. Mules carry what carts cannot. Where mules balk at shale, shoulders finish the work. Way stations are posted by distance, not romance. Water here, fodder here, a place dry enough to sleep here. The word here is more precious than laurel. Loss is counted and taught. A bag bursts on bad ground. The decanus who failed to check the stitching pays shame to the optio and learns to carry a spare cord in the hollow of the fork. A cart axle fails. The centurion who pushed pace over prudence gets a look from the legate that weighs more than a fine. Rome's logistics are a school where the only grade is tomorrow. Siege supply is another grammar. Grain inside a circle must outlast anger. Circumvallation, a ring of ditch and wall, keeps a besieged city in and help out. Contravallation keeps rescuers off the back of the man who digs. Pickets hold gates, mounds rise, testudo creeps, all of it eats food. So a second ring of depots grows in the countryside. Granaries under watch, guarded by men who know that a fire set at 3rd hour can waste a month's law. This is why Rome loves roads, not for marching alone, but for feeding what marching starts. At night, supply becomes culture. Fires are set in regulated rows. Boiling follows water discipline learned from aediles. Draw, cover, boil, lid stays on unless the optio says off. The cook line is a polity. Insults are currency. Favors are banked as saved salt and spare onions. The man who can turn ration into something like stew will one day run a shop that feeds half a neighborhood, because nothing in life resembles command as closely as the evening meal. Back home, this culture walks into markets. Men who learn to take turns at the mill become patient in queues. Women who learn that posted hours for mills mean better babies press tribunes for quiet afternoons and get them. Aediles who learned that a name on a slate keeps panic from inventing rumors post often and early when barges delay. Rome's calm isn't stoicism, it's notice. Down at the water, sacks cross from quay to shoulder, shoulder to cart, cart to horium, with a rhythm that looks like prayer. The river Tiber bears the load without complaint. At dusk you can hear water shoulder wood and wood shoulder rope. It's the sound of a city teaching itself that hunger is a problem solved with procedures. Maps lie kindly, alliances do not. The Latin War ended with an arrangement that looked untidy to men who loved colors in neat blocks and perfect to men who loved numbers that arrived on time. Citizenship came in grades, rights came in packets, obligation came as clauses that could be read and sued upon. Civitas optima or full citizenship meant tribe, vote, appeal, contracts that breathed like citizens. Civitas sign suffragio, citizenship without vote, gave connubium proper marriage, commercium, contracts that courts respect, and provocatio in the right places. Socii, allies, kept pride intact and pledged men, grain, carts, and obedience to schedule. Nobody liked it entirely. Everyone could live inside it without choking. The glue was the colony. Plant a square on a hill with 2 straight streets. Hang the 12 tables and a fasti board. Put the weights on hooks and the edict where even a tired eye can read it. Parcel out land in strips that make neighbors. Give veterans rows of vines to keep their hands busy in winter and their voices lower in taverns. Install a council that understands roads, drains, and quarrels about goats. Send a prefectus sometimes, mostly let them do it. Where law traveled, language followed. A Sabine word stuck because it solved something. A Greek habit stuck because it made dinner faster. A Latin oath learned a local joke and became more tolerable. The miracle wasn't sameness, it was compatibility. A pot fired in a colony lip fit into a lid made near Rome because the aediles agreed on diameters. A contract drafted in a colony's hand stood up under a praetor's formula because the clerk learned to write unless and shall where Rome put them. Treaties walked the roads like manifestos made of grain. Fodera listed levy quotas and provisions, rites of passage, penalties. They read like recipes. Mix men from here with pay from there, bake at this heat for that long, remove before pride burns. When war came, Allied standards stood beside Roman, not underneath. When spoils were counted, numbers calmed envy. The standard-bearer who planted the right pole in the right place in hostile ground was more of a poet than most men who wrote hexameters. Sometimes the weave frayed. A town balked at a levy, a road washed out and patience with it. A censor's list admitted a man a neighbor hated. The repair was never a speech. It was a board, names of contractors, dates of repairs, the weight of fines. Aediles posted grain arrivals. Praetors issued interdicts to keep possession calm. Tribunes drafted a line that made a habit out of what used to be a favor. Latin pride wrinkled, smoothed, and went back to work. At a colony gate on a market day, the arrangement looks like gossip. A Latin merchant and a Roman contractor argue the price of timber. They cite the same clause about rim width in city streets, the same market hours, the same fine for shaving weight. They conclude with a shrug that means we are stuck with being sensible. 2 boys outside listen, roll their eyes, and will one day repeat every line of this conversation because it saved them money. By night, the square surrenders to lamplight and bread smells. The Temple of Concord is small and less smug the closer you sit to it. You can hear a mother reading a schedule to her daughter, by the 3rd market day, by the harvest, by the kalends. A city that learned to write time, learned to share it. The river Tiber accepts crates at the quay and returns the favor by not drowning anyone who read the stairs correctly. The weave holds. If the Via Appia is a bold sentence, the Via Valeria is a patient paragraph. It runs east from Tiburtina Gate into hills that chew wheels and men and teaches both to cooperate. The Apennines are not impressed by plans. The Valeria persuades them with switchbacks, cuttings, and a crown so true rain respects it. Building here required a new politeness towards slope. Surveyors learned to choose longer over steeper. Crews learned to cut side drains that drank a storm before the road did. Milestones crept forward like well-meant promises that could be kept in winter. Villages grew where water crossed stone, not by accident, but by contracts that set fountains, troughs, and bakers where men arrived hungry with coin. The coast needed a different grammar. Spurs ran to harbors, stitching quays into the mainland, south to Minturne and Formiae, north along the Via Aurelia while it was still moody with puddles and salt wind. Coastal roads breathe tidal logic, embankments that accept flood and ebb, culverts that don't clog on first leaf fall, causeways that keep carts from learning to swim. Engineers listen to fishermen the way praetors listen to notaries, for the little fact that saves a big embarrassment. Bridges here earned their names. Arches learned to throw their weight sideways into buttresses set on soundings done with poles and curses. The lesson from the Tiber, piles driven until the earth objected and then a little more, traveled outward. Approaches widened, parapets rose, stonemasons became minor saints in districts that learned what it meant to walk across floodwater with dry feet and children on shoulders. Way stations along these arteries became schools in logistics. An official tariff pinned to a post taught a muleteer his rights as well as his bill. The best stations taught repair. A blacksmith who could square a shoe and harden it without making it brittle. A wheelwright who could save a spoke instead of replacing the cart. A bad station learned to improve or went hungry. Roads are empires that punish shoddy with silence. The Valeria did another thing maps forget. It changed news. A mountain town learned a riot had failed 3 valleys away and decided to sell olive oil at last month's price. A city clerk learned his cousin's wedding date before the wine was gone. A praetor learned a rockfall had taken a bend and sent men with picks and posts without convening philosophy. Information loves a surface. At dusk, on a terrace above a cut, you can watch swallows find the air's veins and riders find the roads. Somewhere below, the river Tiber is a rumor of tin, its patience untroubled by your perspective. A man with a sore knee blesses the mason who chose one more layer under this stretch 40 miles from home. Blessings like that never reach the Senate. The road hears them. The quickest way to misunderstand Roman siege is to imagine it as a duel. It is a build. A city is a problem in height. The solution begins with ditches, banks, palisades, and math. The legion cuts a ring into earth. Engineers sketch angles so missiles cross where an enemy might run. Towers roll where ground allows. Rams walk forward under sheds covered in hides that stink and save. Stone replies with stone. Defenders throw pots of fire. Hooks search for beams to pull. Sallies test the ring for sleep. The Roman answer is not rage, it is repair. The best compliment inside a besieged wall is to mutter, "They are tireless." The worst is, they are clever. Rome tries to be the first as much as she dares the second. Ramps, agors move hills where hills do not cooperate. Dirt, timber, stone, brush, baskets moving up and down like breathing. A century can move a hill if it knows it must. When a ramp takes a month, the city learns to hate the sound of spades more than the thud of rams. A wall learns to respect persistence. Medicine grows out of this patience. Wounds are cut, washed, bound. Vinegar and wine do more work than gods. Field hospitals, tents with order, become a habit. Surgeons who know artery from vein by where the blood goes. Assistants who know which instrument to pass before the surgeon asks. Record keepers who can tell a commander how many men will stand again by market day. Rome's mercy is pragmatic. Survivors stand in line next spring. That is not cynicism, it is planning. Inside the besieged town, law competes with fear. Good councils ration fairly, bad ones let hoarders write policy. Rome's loudest weapon is often a parley in which a legate recites what grain is left and what day it will run out if men keep eating the way they are. The numbers are an insult and an education. Gates sometimes open on a day earlier than Pride forecast because arithmetic is harder to argue with than honor. When the breach comes, the cornicen's note tightens the skin on arms. The testudo, shields low, moves like a persuader. Ladders rise and fall, men rise and fall, and the city learns whether its stones were set by men who feared rain. Afterward, pillage is timed because the worst thing you can do to victors is let them rot in victory. A clock saves souls. Orders save reputations. The best commanders understand that their name will outlast today's anger. What does this teach the Forum? That repair is the highest civic art. A bridge after flood, a drain after storm, a market after panic, a law after a bad day. Each is a siege in miniature. Ring the problem, deny it its favorite supplies, work without drama, time the end. Citizens trained to admire that rhythm sleep better and vote calmer. When night falls on a finished ramp, the wind makes a noise in the brush woven into its face. Men who shoveled all day lie with arms arranged like tools and dream of water. Down valley, the river Tiber moves slowly, its patience a kind of medicine. The man who will decide repairs tomorrow listens to that patience the way a surgeon listens to a chest. The city breathes. Rome breathes with two lungs. One draws air from hills, the other pulls salt from a mouth shaped by river and sea. Ostia is that mouth's discipline, quays that accept loads, warehouses that exhale them, clerks who understand that storms have opinions. The harbor master at dawn is a choreographer. He reads the tide, the wind, the drought of boats waiting outside the bar. He moves tokens on a board, not a game, a forecast. Barges that came up on last night's flood are pushed to stairs in order. Crews from posted lists, the same names that aediles carve on slates in the city, brace and lift. The mooring rings along the quay tell their story in scars, where ropes bit in drought, where they chewed in a season when the river forgot to be generous. Warehouses, horia, make weather irrelevant. Airflows, tiles keep heat honest, doors take seals that men fear to break because the aediles believe in inspection as a sacrament. Grain breathes, oil rests, wine cools, garum tries to leave and is persuaded to stay. Portoria, customs are taken with a moderation that feels like relief to men who have seen other ports. The rule is not cheap, it is knowable. Knowable draws ships. Work here teaches politeness sharper than law. A man who steps on another's rope learns to fly. A boy who walks under a yard learns why curses were invented. But there is softness too. A fishwife shares a melon when a storm pins crews to land. A freedman tosses a fig to a boy whose father lifts wrong for a living and needs his son to learn better. Ostia is a school where every lesson is weight. The sea brings more than cargo, news, diseases, gods, jokes. A sailor says a Carthaginian curse with Campanian vowels. A Rhodian argues about tack and makes a Roman captain listen. A Judean merchant counts with stones across his fingers and teaches a clerk to halve and double faster than wax allows. The port teaches the city that difference is an asset if counted early and taxed modestly. Storm days are the port's exam. Men sound piles with hammers, fenders are strung like rosaries, light boats hauled high and tied as if they were loved. Quays flood and shrug. The harbor master sleeps in his chair and wakes to the sound of a rope stretching wrong. He does not love drama. He loves the 2 seconds he won for a boy to move. At dawn after, a slate lists who did more than their share. Thanks is a currency, it buys tomorrow. At evening, the port hosts a gentler theater. Singers by the stairs, a fisherman tying and retying knots because hands don't know how to be idle, a priest of a small god pouring a small libation and asking for safe water without poetry. Downriver, the city's lamps print ladders that the tide edits. You can say it here too. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight, tired of being everyone's answer and still willing. Before a road is a road, it is a line in a mind. The surveyor carries the instrument, groma, that makes lines climb out of thought and pin themselves to earth. A vertical staff, a cross of arms, plumb lines that hang like calm threats, a boy at the far point with a rod, a chain team with lengths that know their exact greed in summer and shyness in winter. The wonder is not that they can draw straight, it is that they can draw straight enough in a world that hates it. The survey begins with sight. Find high points that speak to each other. Test bearing with the groma until the plumb lines agree. Drop a stake, move, repeat. The chain team follows with measures, correcting for slope with rules ground crews mutter like prayers. 100 feet on this fall equals 96 on the flat. Numbers turn into flags, flags turn into cuts, cuts into ditches, ditches into beds that accept stone like a welcome guest. Curves are where skill hides. A bad curve is a confession, too sharp for carts, too long for patience, ashamed of itself in the rain. A good curve is a decision. Earth said no, and men answered yes in a tone Earth respects. Culverts are placed where water wants to go, not where pride wants it to. Side drains are cut before ruts appear. The surveyor is paid to prevent apologies. Boundary is the surveyor's other life. Law needs lines it can point to. The same plumb that makes a road makes a field. The same chain that measures a span measures an inheritance. Servitudes, right-of-way, water, drip, are drawn in widths and angles, not in anger. A judge walking with cord and witnesses is a surveyor with an audience. Milestones are the survey's public diary. Set at regular paces, carved with distance and sometimes names, they do more than count. They teach confidence. A traveler who can say 3 more without lying to himself is a calmer man. A contractor who learns his stone will carry his name along a road becomes unreasonably careful. Children who trace numbers on a milestone learn arithmetic by touch. Mistakes happen. A slope slips, a bank fails, a farmer moves a marker after wine. The repair is quicker than the original because the grammar exists. Men talk of angles, fill, toe and crown like bakers talk of yeast. Words that lived on boards move into mouths. Knowledge becomes portable. The surveyor ends the day where the road will pass next year, his eyes squinting at a rod held by a boy who is learning to be patient. A wind lifts dust. Gnats pretend to be politics. The man lowers the groma and smiles because the plumb lines finally stop their tiny wars. Down in the city, the river Tiber moves like an old joke that still works. Lines meet water, water meets stone. The world agrees to behave for one more season. Day is law's theater, night is law's test. Rome learned to prefer a boring night and invented methods to earn it. Watches in pairs, torches rationed, routes that change so thieves cannot write timetables on your door. The watch's job is not heroics, it's presence. Footfalls where mischief imagines silence. The city's patrol borrows from camp, call and response passwords, routes posted for sergeants and secret for street, report slates that list loose boards, broken latches, lanterns that need oil before moonless nights. Aediles care as much about the last as the first because darkness is an invitation lazy men write. Fire is night's bully. Buckets hang by edict. Hooks and mattocks sleep in chests with seals. The Aediles are allowed to break with no permission asked. At a shout, neighbors form a chain that makes strangers into a team before introductions. A small law pays men whose walls become fire breaks. Gratitude pays more. By second hour, steam rises and the blackboard gains names under helped beyond reason. That list breeds tomorrow's help. Noise is policed with humor. A tavern that forgets itself is fined in bread for watchmen the next week. A host learns to close shutters before a song becomes a fight. Lamps are checked. A dark stretch earns a chalk X and a note that buys oil in the morning. Rome's night is not piety, it's maintenance. Thieves exist, law makes them tired. Furtum conceptum, search under witnesses, keeps rage out and evidence in. Inuria for insult said in night's anonymity bites just as hard in morning. Servants moving with bundles after midnight must carry notes. Men who mimic them learn that the praetor believes in curiosity. Watchmen who beat where words would do earn marks that shorten their service. A city that lets procedure carry pride into the dark protects more than pots. There is kindness here too. The watch learns faces, the woman who walks home from the ovens with flour on her arms, the old man who sleeps early and wakes earlier, the boy who carries letters for a notary and stumbles because he reads while he walks. People who feel seen behave better. That is not morality, it is physics. Sometimes the night is beautiful. Fog from the Tiber softens lamps to halos. The bridge prints 2 faces on the water. The island divides current into slow hands. A watchman leans and listens. He would be embarrassed to call it poetry. He calls it a good shift. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight, and the city for once keeps time without being told. Give a people roads and water, and you do more than move goods. You edit their minds. Straight lines change the way rooms argue. Schedules change the way throats shout. Merchants who used to price by risk price by distance. A day replaces a story. Mothers who used to measure by luck measure by fasti and nundine. A child learns that by the 3rd market day means something his legs can feel. Priests learn to close days without being accused of theft, because men can walk to the board and see the reason. The Temple of Concord stops being a sculpture and becomes a habit. Offices adjust. A praetor writes formulae that assume men will show on certain days because the Via Appia does not drown in a tantrum. Aediles set fines to repair the stones that offenders wear down. Censors let contracts that reward maintenance rather than heroics. Tribunes draft bills that make good days cheaper rather than bad days louder. Roads are not just a policy, they are a theory of temperament. Even grammar tilts. Words like unless, within, by, and not before grow teeth. A promise becomes a calendar entry. A threat becomes an if tied to a fine. People begin to prefer the sentence that works to the speech that thrills. Children roll their eyes at rhetoric and copy numbers. This is not utopia. It is robustness. Carts still break, floods still test, a good man still trips, a bad man still smiles. But the surface forgives more and punishes faster. A rutted lane becomes a fine. A flooded quay becomes a repair team with names. A man who shaved weight last month discovers that eyes remember. By the time a traveler reaches the edge of Italy, the roads have trained him to expect that the next road will be better than fear says. He acts like a Roman before he calls himself one. That is conquest, done with infrastructure and manners. The city will one day have more stone than patience. In this age, she has more patience than marble. It is a better ratio. Night falls. The river Tiber catches ladders of light from the bridge and pairs them into smaller rungs. You can say the line and mean it in more than one way. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight. Water, yes. And also a people who taught themselves to value slow, certain over fast, loud. Before a road delivers grain and a legion delivers victory, a house delivers competence. Rome's women make that competence visible and then pretend it isn't remarkable. The law names them in tidy ways, uxor, materfamilias, liberta, but the city knows them by their lists. Start in a courtyard where light has learned to behave. A woman lifts the lid on an amphora and listens, because good oil makes a sound that is almost nothing. She tips a little into a lamp, wipes the lip with a strip of wool, and notes the stir in a wax tablet. Oil out, oil in, from which merchant, on which nundine. She is not counting for fun, she is counting so that predictable happens. Her keys rattle on her belt, storeroom, coffer, gate. A child knows by the sound which room will open and which argument will close. The market is her second room. She knows the aediles board better than some aediles do. Who was fined for lees in oil, who shaved a weight, which mill forgot, posted hours, and paid twice for the lesson. She buys with her fingers, the curve of a cup's lip, the ring of a weight, the lift of a basket, because lies cannot fool tendons. She is not severe, she is methodical. Sellers learn to love method because it returns them customers. Her legal posture depends on form, and she has learned to choose forms that protect work. Marriage sign menu keeps her property hers, which means the dose is a trust, not a trophy. If things sour, she recovers most of it unless her fault is proven, and the proof must fit a formula. When a tutor, guardian, thinks to play at importance, the praetor's edict hems him in with words that make him behave like a seal on a chest, necessary, silent, honest. Work spills past rooms. Women run stalls, spices, cloth, small loans. They run laundries with vats of urine and ash that strip grease from wool and stain hands to honor. They manage bakehouses, reading heat with bare arms in a way no man can imitate without getting burned twice. The collegia, associations, are not closed to them where sense wins over habit. A guild's book with a woman's neat hand in it is a safer book. They practice law in small ways all day. A woman knows the by the third market day clause better than the tribune who wrote it. She forces contracts to schedules and moods to corners. She can quote the 12 tables where it touches her door. Eaves must keep drip. Roads must admit feet. Funerals must not bully with gold or hired grief. She does not do this to win. She does it to save time. Manumitted women, liberté, bend the city's curve with enterprise. Freed from a household where they learned everything an aristocrat doesn't know, they apply that knowledge with ungentle force. Bookkeeping that could shame a quaestor, credit extended with a smile and collected with an eyebrow, quality control that makes a stall a habit. Their sons become citizens with clean names. Their daughters become the kind of wives who bring ledgers as dowry and expect husbands to treat numbers as affection. Religion gives them rooms of their own. The Vestal virgins stand apart, an order with fire for a heart and privilege sharp enough to make a censor nervous. Beyond them, ordinary rites surround ordinary labor. A Laris shrine kissed in passing, a Matralia rite that tastes like bread and hope, offerings at a street compitum that keep luck sweet. The calendar is a toolbox. Festivals are as much scheduling as ecstasy. When war takes husbands, women keep accounts and children, and sometimes the farm. They calculate interest correctly and pay on time so that Poetilius's mercy, no bondage for debt, stays a habit, not a rumor. A woman farms with a spade and a deadline. The road carries her grain, the river Tiber carries her jars, Her letter to the camp carries her voice. A city that trains women to use systems rather than beg from men is a city that repairs quickly. It is not all admiration. Insults travel, and the law learns to touch them. Inuria shields a woman's reputation when words seek to dim it. Dowry clauses shield her capital when laziness seeks to eat it. Guardianship rules shield her agency when male vanity seeks to perform on it. None of these are perfect, all of them accumulate into safety. At dusk, the street outside is quieter because mills keep rest hours and carts obey rim rules. She writes 3 figures on wax and blows the last lamp. From the window, she can see the river Tiber slipping with a confidence she shares. You can say it without embroidery. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight, and she will hear schedule, bread, sleep. A city that wants tomorrow to look like a tidier version of today must teach children where to put their feet. Rome teaches with wax and rope, with copies and chores. It is not a school system, it is a culture. A boy or girl in a decent lane meets literature first, the teacher of letters who smells of reed pens, figs, and patience. The alphabet is sung into order, then syllables are rubbed like coins until shine becomes reading. Copying begins early, the 12 tables in short bites, maxims that are stodgy and useful, addresses to gods that double as hand practice. A child learns to cut quills, mix ink, and exchange errors for neater lines. Numeracy comes yoked to market, tallying sesterces, dividing loaves, measuring oil, calculating interest in small, proud sums. The Nundinae are a natural abacus, 8-day cycles that train forecasting. 3 market days from now becomes a muscle in the mind. A good teacher writes small accounts on a board and makes children close them. Law sneaks in through games. A circle scratched in dust is a boundary. A child who moves a stone cheats and meets a story about gods who punish termini thieves. A stipulation becomes a chant. Do you promise? I promise. The words fall deliciously in mouths and stick there for life. Servitudes are taught with sticks and imaginary buckets. A path here 2 cubits wide, water drawn at 3rd hour, hedges cut back at new moon. Laughter hides serious memory. The ludi magister, higher teacher, adds poetry and history for those who can spare sons or daughters that long. Verse curbs the tongue, stories give shape to duties. Fasti, calendars, are copied, not because children love columns, but because columns are how time is tamed. A child learns which days close with an augur small word and why that is not theft, but timing. Work is not postponed for learning, it is the partner of learning. Children carry water, copy prices, run notes that are receipts in their own way, and recite edicts to mothers who have no time to stand in the square. A boy learns to replace rivets in a rim. A girl learns the smell of good oil and the sound of bad. Both learn to tell truth with measurements. Some go farther, to grammatici who unlock Greek, to rhetors who tease thunder out of throats. But even without that polish, the core holds. Reading that feeds law, counting that feeds markets, schedule sense that feeds calm. There is snobbery, there is also mobility. A clerk's neat hand can raise a family faster than a hero's shout. Even play obeys light law. Knucklebones and hoops respect lanes. Grown-ups fine with looks and errands. Children listen for the watch at night and love the 2-syllable passwords more than lullabies. They learn that lamps with oil sleep better than streets without it, and that both happen because someone wrote something. At evening, a child traces a milestone number carved near the family stall and asks what it means. The answer is a small speech about distance and promise. The child will forget the words. He will keep the feeling that numbers can be trusted. Below the street, the river Tiber presses the day into the sea with its old, even tempo. The line fits again. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight, and the child is being taught to move the same way. Building dazzles, maintenance saves. Rome's maturity shows not in laying stone, but in checking it until it behaves. The crews who do this are not anonymous to those who sleep because of them. A road wakes up tired. Frost has argued with joints. Carts have persuaded edges to pretend they are round. A gang, 5, 6, sometimes 10, walks with hammers, chisels, crowbars, lime, gravel. They tap each joint and hear the difference between tight and about to lie. A man with a wedge bites under a rocking block and lifts while another packs rudis where rain stole it. The leader knows the song, crown, shoulder, ditch, bed. He says it until the road remembers. A mile done well is worth more than 3 done showy. Ditches are the road's lungs. Left silted, they drown the crown. Cleaned, they breathe the storm. Crews carry mattocks and baskets. The rhythm is tidy. Scoop, twist, toss, stamp. Culverts are cleared with hooks and curse proverbs that work better than prayers. Every village boy learns the boyish joy of water suddenly obeying, and then the adult joy of a path staying passable. Milestones are counted and set straight. A leaning stone is an accusation, a missing one, a theft of hope. The crew chief writes a number and a note in a book that will be read at a censor's table. Names go up when work is done. Fines go out when work is pretended. Rome discovered early that posting is cheaper than shouting. Water wants different care. The Via Appia is mostly hidden, which means crews become moles, moving under light with lamps that smell like patience. They listen for seep by ear. They watch for salts on stone. They walk with rods to tap and mark. A joint with root ambition is opened and reseeded with lime. A settled run is underpacked and raised. Where air must enter to calm head, the putae shafts are brushed, their lids reset to scold curious boys. At the Castella, distribution tanks, an aedile and a water overseer exchange numbers. Flow, draw, remainder, loss. Illegal taps are a sport beloved by men who prefer clever to good. Fines and plugs make sport expensive. A public spout is scrubbed and the stones below it brushed because cleanliness stops sickness more reliably than spells. The woman who notices this thanks no one. She fills her jar and leaves. Bridges are checked with hammers on piles. Sound travels up. Rot reveals itself as a thud with sadness in it. Stones that tired of their neighbors are put back in fellowship with lead cramps and wedges. Approaches are patched where wheels make puddles their experiment. Names carved on parapets do their work. They embarrass men into care. All this care is scheduled. Seasons have lists. Before the big rains, ditches. After floods, stairs. Before summer, lime. Before winter, joints. The Fosti help crews plan so work does not trip over feast. A man who learns how to sequence repairs could quiet a market riot with a broom and a chalkboard because order is transferable. Failure is not a scandal if reported. A crew that records a slip earns trust. One that hides it earns a note from censors that shortens futures. The public learns to tolerate inconvenience when the board says why and how long. The habit of telling saves more tempers than talent. At sunset, a foreman washes lime off his hands, pats the stone he set, and feels the tiredness that is all earned and not at all bitter. Down the slope, lamplight climbs stairs wet from a rinse. On the river, barges murmur against rings. You can say the line and mean it, as praise for men who never heard poetry. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight, and the work will still be there tomorrow, in the best sense. Patronage in the oldest stories looks like theater. Clients in togas at dawn, a famous man giving boons that taste like authority. In the Rome we are walking, the script has been rewritten by law and infrastructure. The best patrons have become guides to rules. The worst are fossils. The morning salutatio still happens. A line forms, craftsman who needs a letter to an aedile about stall placement, a freedman who wants the name of a scribe for a dowry contract, a veteran who heard there's a road repair crew taking men with good backs and better tempers. The patron sees quickly that the old magic, I will speak to the judge, is obsolete in a city that loves posting and formulae. He points instead, here is the clause, here is the office, here is the deadline. Take this note with my seal so they know you're not lying about the facts. The letter is short, 2 sentences, 1 name, a fact. In a system tuned to procedure, this matters more than volume. The aedile reads the seal, checks the board, and fits the man into the queue. The patron's real gift is literacy of process. He knows the fasti, the opening hour, the man who cares about rim width because he ruined a pair of sandals last month. Clients learn maps. Maps replace favors. When a quarrel stings, the inuria kind, the patron does not throw weight, he throws law. Stand here, speak only when asked. If you are wrong, offer composition and stop talking. He sends a note to the praetor's usher that says, essentially, this one will be orderly. The court moves faster for everyone because men arrive trained. Money still passes, but it grows honest. A patron invests in a client's work, not in his obedience. A loan to a cloth stall, terms written by a notary, interest posted like a promise. If default comes, it walks a known path. Men can forgive each other inside forms more easily than inside stories. A bad patron tries the old method, shouting, crowding, "Remember me," and discovers that censors have long memories and aediles have boards. His clients thin as they find patrons whose letters fit the age. The city conducts this evolution without speeches, by rewarding the man whose advice comes with a map, and punishing the man whose advice comes with a boast. In colonies, patronage looks like neighborliness. A respected elder sits in a stoa and writes 3 letters in a hand that has forgiven many boys. One sends a girl to a woman who keeps books straight. One sends a carpenter to a crew that needs a measure man. One recommends a widow to the magistrate for a tax delay, with a note that quotes the clause that allows it. No one bows. Everyone nods. At funerals, the new patronage is read aloud in names on stones, contracts done on time, bridges standing, repairs scheduled, thanks posted. The dead man's mask looks down from the wall and means less than the parapet that did not fall in last spring's flood. Children learn whom to admire without being told. Even in politics, this process patronage holds. A candidate is measured by the roads he kept, the water he quieted, the edicts he wrote in sentences that a tired woman could understand. He advertises not promises but records, a list that anyone can check at a stone where wheels polished names. He wins not with thunder but with maintenance. At day's end, a patron reads his own ledger. Who came, who was sent, who needs follow-up on the 3rd market day? He nods, not pleased with himself but pleased with the shape of the day. Outside, the river Tiber moves with a quiet that is almost contagious. You can trust the line again. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight, and so, thank the gods, do reputations now. The city's pulse is regular because its hands cooperate. Collegia, associations of craft, do not swagger, they organize. They keep altars, minutes, and funerals. They standardize sizes, hours, and habits. A buyer moving from one end of the square to the other finds cup lips that match, jar necks that agree, loaf weights that differ only as appetite does. That trivial harmony is the work of people who meet after hours, pass a wooden box for dues, and argue about whether a grip on a chisel should be wrapped 2 or 3 times before voting to teach the twice wrap to apprentices so wrists last. The guild's books are tidy. Income, dues, the occasional grateful gift after a crisis, a small fee from the festival stall. Outgoings, oil for the altar lamp, funeral allotments, loans to members for tools on terms that feel stern to youths and kind to adults. The aediles approve charters that ban political posing and noisy feasts. They require that officers post accounts every nundine so envy can be deflected with numbers. The point is not control, it's continuity. Apprenticeship is a contract in human form. A boy or girl is handed to a master with 2 promises, feed and teach. The master signs with a name that the censors read, and the parents go home with worry that has shape. An apprentice learns to turn rough into true, a rim, a seam, a stance. They also learn the square's constitution, cues, weights, hours, and the difference between a rule and a custom. When they go free, they inherit not only a trade but a style of citizenship. Stories travel across guilds faster than trouble. The dyers learn from the smith's accident report, vent before flame when weather turns. The bakers borrow the potter's trick for reading heat by ear. The carpenters copy the cooper's ledger layout because clarity is contagious. A city becomes intelligent when its crafts get nosy in each other's notebooks. At festivals, the collegia decorate the rote with things that work, frames that will be used tomorrow, wheels that will roll for years, a giant cup that is still perfectly balanced because a cooper refuses to be sloppy even when pretending. The crowd cheers without knowing it is cheering maintenance. That ignorance is a compliment. At night, guild elders add names to the sick list and the spare list, who can cover whose post without fuss. The moon catches the river Tiber where it leans against rings, and the city's quiet backbone hums. Tomorrow's square will open on time because dozens of little constitutions will open inside it. Rome schedules pressure. The calendar keeps work honest. It also lends the city a day here and there to become its own safety valve. On Saturnalia, roles invert. Masters serve, slaves wear caps, and jokes grow a respectful edge. The day tells power 2 things it needs to hear. You are temporary and you are watched. Families bank the warmth for colder mornings. The Compitalia, crossroads rights, honor the lares who keep corners kind. Neighbors clean before they pray, brooms do as much for peace as incense. A little garland, a little cake, an agreement about noise after dark that is a prayer disguised as a rule. Boys are entrusted to carry tiny figures from door to door. Their pride makes them careful, and their care makes them citizens. During Perilia, shepherds leap fires that are more smoke than flame. They wash flocks with words older than literacy, then eat and laugh, and the city remembers it is also pasture. On Lupercalia, the roughness is rehearsed, contained by rotes, cordons, watch, and 1,000 knowing smirks. By ritualizing mischief, the city teaches mischief manners. The Vestal fire never sleeps. It is continuity made visible, kept by women whose authority is as stark as their discipline. A child staring at their seats during games learns that Rome's holiness is domestic. It is a hearth scaled up, not a thunderbolt scaled down. When the Vestals pass, men step aside with the easy awkwardness reserved for people you trust more than you understand. Feast days are public policy smuggled into pleasure. The Fasti tell courts to wait, mills to hum, drains to be cleared before crowds move. The aediles post routes, the augurs post fit days, the watch rehearses signals. Joy is not spontaneous, it's organized. That is why it returns. At twilight, garlands droop in the good way, and the streets smell of smoke, wine, and washed stone. Lamps blur on the Tiber. The island splits the current into two dark ribbons that rejoin like friends after a joke went too far. The city sighs, not because it is tired of itself, but because it knows how to rest. Stone makes promise, coin makes choice. The as and its fractions, weighty bronze with value you can feel, teach hands to count slowly. Later, silver will lighten that lesson. For now, bronze keeps fingers honest. Sellers lay coin on boards, buyers turn it to check mark and sound. A clipped edge bites, a false ring betrays, an aedile's punch sets the argument to rest. Prices are public memory. Chalk on slates, slates on posts, posts in eyesight. A pound of bread for so much grain at so much cost. When storms flirt with famine, the Senate and aediles smooth spikes by releasing reserves and publishing arrivals. Panic is a story. A schedule is an answer. The city prefers answers. Wages live in daylight. A road gang's pay is posted next to the contract. A porter's day rate is plain on a warehouse door. A baker's apprentice knows when the half loaf rises to a full because he can read the board. Haggling still happens. Cheating still tries. But the public arithmetic narrows the arena in which cleverness can pretend to be skill. Credit survives but wears paper. The stipulatia, 2 lines of promise, pins the future to a date. Merchants extend terms with the exactness of men who can calculate interest in their heads, and the praetor enforces a culture where late is expensive and timely is boring. Boring keeps cupboards full. Counterfeiting exists and is a teacher. Fines are multiples of mischief. Names are posted where shame works. The mint tightens die and weight. As coin grows surer, markets spread longer. A jar of oil leaves Ostia with a price that still looks sensible 3 roads away. Trust expands as a circle of chalk does under a confident hand. At close, the money changer shudders with fingers that have counted respectably. He salts the lamps, listens to the Tiber below the quay, and tells his apprentice tomorrow's float. Numbers, neatly stacked, make a sound like sleep. If roads are stubborn and aqueducts discreet, bridges are brave. The Tiber forgives fools rarely. It rewards planners always. Piles are driven until the earth protests, then a little more. Cofferdams hold back the river long enough for men to set courses that interlock like oaths. Arches throw weight sideways into piers that wear day after day of water's argument. The genius lies at the approach. 50 paces before and after must be paved and crowned. Ditches must drink. Parapets must rise to the height of a wandering child's shoulder. In flood, driftwood slams like siege engines. Cutwaters split blows. Rings sit where rope can find them without twisting a boat into a club. The aediles mark the flood stairs so people stop lying to themselves about depth. Maintenance is music. Hammers on piles, the ring that means sound, the thud that means rot. Men lift joints, pack lead, and sign the stone with a name the censors can read. In spring, a board lists approved crossings when haste makes death fashionable. In winter, notices warn of ice that pretends to be bridge. Warnings save men who would never confess to being warned. At night, the bridge mirrors itself. Lamps toss ladders of light that the current edits. The island's shoulders part the flow. The city's mood falls with the water's level. You can say it for truth and for comfort. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight. and the bridge, that polite defiance, stands where tomorrow will need it. Rome's quiet depends on fields that are busy out of sight. Villas are not palaces first, they are factories of soil. A steward walks with a slate and counts hands, days, tools, oxen, wine, oil, fodder. He is part quartermaster, part schoolmaster, part pessimist. His art is to plan so weather looks like inconvenience, not doom. Specialization whispers across hills. Here, olives, terraces that teach stone patience. There, vines in soldierly rows. Farther, grain, wider than a man's breath can finish. Mixed farms ensure themselves. Bees for sweetness and wax, pigs for appetite and solvency, sheep for wool and walking wealth. Slaves and free laborers work to bell, song, and deadline. A bad overseer shouts, a good one counts. Roads and rivers are as important to farms as rain. A terrace without a path is a poem. With a path, it is profit. A press without a cart is a smell. With a cart, it is market. The steward knows Nundinay calendars as well as any city mother. He hits price by timing, not by prayer. He trains a boy to read a milestone number the way others read omens. Book farmers write neat instructions. How many yolks per acre? How many eyes watch a press? How much vinegar in workers' water under the sun? Real stewards edit the books with experience and calm. The best habit they pass on is repair. Mend walls before a storm. Scrape channels before a flood. Replace handles before they break and bruise a hand that can't be spared. When the carts finally creak toward town, the city receives certainty dressed as food. Bread becomes cues that behave. Oil becomes lamps that forgive long nights. Wine becomes patience in cups that did not have patience earlier. The line is circular and clean. Villas feed roads, roads feed markets, markets feed households. Households send sons and daughters back to villas to keep the arithmetic alive. Dusk leans on fields with that color that has no name. A steward checks locks and sighs the sigh of a man who did not run but finished. In the distance a river thread glints. It is not the Tiber, but it speaks the same language, steady. News used to ride gossip, now it rides roads. A request leaves a colony sealed in wax with a signet everyone in the district recognizes. It travels by relay, runner to mule, mule to cart, cart back to runner where the road pinches. The message carries two numbers, sent and due. If the second is missed, a copy departs before fear has time to replace curiosity. In the city, tabellari set off from inns where water is clean and oats honest. They carry redundancy in pairs when it matters. They swap sandals when straps fail. They learn to cup a candle against wind so a message can be copied under awning at midnight. The best run like water, not fast, exactly, but unarguably. Public notices continue the service. Aediles post arrivals and repairs. Praetors post edicts and extensions. Censors post contracts and names. A city that reads itself becomes legible to its neighbors. Disputes shrink when they begin with dates and quotes rather than stories. At night, a courier sleeps with a satchel under his cloak and a hand on the strap. He smells of lamp smoke and dust. The inn roof tick-ticks as it cools. Far away, the Tiber tucks barges against the quay for morning's work. In the gap between those two safeties, letters reach the right hands. Work builds the city. Leisure keeps it from cracking. The theater teaches order without scolding. Seats by rank that do not strut. Exits that work. A stage that projects voice without shouting. Comedy makes a joke of officials, so officials remember to make a joke of themselves before the mob does it for them. Tragedy gives grief a grammar. People go home tired in the good way. Baths are democracy and steam. Striggle, oil, heat, cold, rooms for talk and useful gossip. Time to measure health by how a neighbor's color has improved. Scribes draw clients out of warm rooms with the promise of a clean copy. Contractors are trapped long enough to agree to fairer terms. A city that washes together learns to speak to itself. Vendors, nuts, sweets, cheap wine, operate under simple posted rules that keep petty greed from becoming large anger. The Aedile's chalk reaches even here. No stalls in the exit, no hot water poured where feet slip, no bribes to the attendant. The result is relaxation without resentment, which is rarer than marble. The baths close. Bodies steam into night air. The bridge throws broken ladders at the Tiber. Someone counts them without knowing why. Everyone sleeps a little better than they would have if they had stayed home. Not every victory wears iron. Many wear clauses. Italian towns become Roman not by forgetting themselves but by learning to use Roman forms. Civitas Sign Suffragio is a porch. Full citizenship is a room. Passing from one to the other is a story of levees met, roads mended, judgments obeyed, oaths kept. Pride bends, doesn't break. Delegations arrive with jars and grievances. They leave with timetables and seals. A praetor explains appeal in a way that saves a life, a year for 10 years. An aedile shares the design of a drain that ends a plague of ankle-deep tempers. A censor walks a road with a mayor and taps a stone with his stick and says, "This is where your name belongs." Children in those towns learn Latin words for their own good ideas. Old men continue to curse in their own vowels. The flag planted is a standard, not a palace. Centuries later, people will argue about identity and loss. In this age, they argue about rim width and market hours. It is healthier. At night, the delegations dine with dignity. Someone pours the wrong wine first and laughs and is forgiven. The river is not in sight, but a jug of water on the table catches the lamp and pretends to be it. Everyone knows what it means: continuity. A road fails, a bridge lists, a granary is found to be damp. In cities that love drama, men seek a stage. In Rome, men seek a board. Who signed, when, what clause, which remedy? The questions are not excuses, they are tools. Fines pay repairs, names lose weight. The next man in the line decides to live more carefully. Sometimes punishment must bark. A corrupt weigher is marched past the aedile's pegs and made to test every weight for a morning under eyes that remember. A contractor who salted gravel pays by relaying under watch, stone by stone, in public patience. Revenge is cheap. Reform is expensive and worth it. The crowd learns where to look, not at faces for very long, but at joints, crowns, ditches, stairs, hours. Citizens evolve into inspectors with kind tongues and hard expectations. Officials evolve into explainers who publish plans before boasts. The air cools, night folds the lesson away, the river moves on. Rocks at the bottom do not care who apologized. The city does and will remember at the next posting. By now, the argument has made itself. Roads were not only for marching, they were for thinking. Legions were not only for fighting, they were for organizing. Together they built a temperament, steady, scheduled, repairing as reflex. A mother planning a week, a surveyor setting a stake, a quartermaster counting vinegar, an augur closing a sky, a censor tapping a pile, a freedwoman balancing a book. These are the faces of the same sentence. It begins, "We will meet the world as if it can be put in order." It ends, "And we will forgive it when it can't by trying again tomorrow." Down by the water, a barge noses home. The island holds its dark line. Lamps tremble on the surface and fall apart into ripples that join again. Like towns, like families, like years. You can say it one last time with the confidence of someone reporting, not performing. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight. A road without places to stop is a promise made by liars. Rome learned early that stone alone doesn't move people, services do. Threaded along the great arteries are two kinds of rest that make distance behave. The Mansio, official way station, and the Caupona, private inn. Between them flows the tired, hungry, news-heavy life that keeps lines alive. The Mansio is the state's polite handshake with fatigue. Think of it as an administrative camp you don't have to strike each morning. Enclosed yard, stables with drains that actually slope, a room where a clerk sits with a board and a list of who is meant to pass and when. Bunks that are clean because someone has a name carved next to the job of keeping them clean. Officials with diplomas, warrants, can claim a remount, a hot bowl, a measure of wine cut with water, and a corner of table to copy a letter or seal a message. A courier arrives with dust in his teeth, says the password of the week, and a groom is already loosening girth straps because the board said he would. The Caupona is Rome's shrugging genius, private enterprise that behaves like a public utility because reputation travels faster than carts. A good inn sits slightly off the crown of the road, where wheels won't splash mud on loaves cooling in the window. There's a hitching rail and a water trough shaded by whatever tree will put up with mule teeth. Inside, a long table, benches polished by 100 backs, a hearth that knows how to burn low and steady through the second hour of night, a spit that turns, a pot that never quite empties because new stew marries yesterday's flavor. Beds are mattress sacks, straw tapped and turned, and a stack of blankets that have met vinegar more often than fleas. Both places live under rules that travel. The aedile's chalk reaches them through posting. Weights must ring true, wine must not be insulted with too much water, Meat must be shaded, prices must be visible. Even at a lonely kaupona, a small board near the door lists the day rate for a pallet, the price of a bowl, the fee for stabling. It's not virtue, it's good business. A driver who isn't surprised by the bill spends his anger at the mule instead of the host. Supply chains plug into these stops like blood into lungs. A mule train brings oil and salt cakes. A cooper trundles a half-mended barrel and finishes it in the yard, while travelers watch and learn a trick that will save a week's wages next winter. A smith sets a portable forge under an awning and shoes 3 animals before sundown, leaving behind a smell of iron that reads like reassurance. The road's maintenance gangs drink here, count blisters, and exchange information the way physicians exchange case notes. Today the culvert at mile 13 swallowed a boy's sandal. Tomorrow it won't, because 10 men and a mattock plan to disagree with it at dawn. At the Mancio, the clerk's register is a small novel. Column for name, for origin, for destination, for reason, for time due and time arrived. A late mark earns questions but not drama. Weather and wheels answer most questions. The clerk's proudest entry is the line where arrived and due match, because a system that hits its own shadow builds trust faster than speeches. A Roman who believes the Mancio will be where it should be at the hour it promises becomes a Roman who believes courts will open when they say they will, and grain will be on the quay when the slate claims. Inside the kaupona, law hides in laughter. A pair of muleteers settle a wager with a stipulation. So practiced the host mouths the lines with them. Do you promise 10 if the wagon passes the ford before the 3rd hour tomorrow? I promise. A notary at the next bench grins and adds the date with his stylus for free, because men who like clean promises like clean stew. A peddler of pins produces a weight from his sleeve that he invites anyone to test against the host's hook, showmanship as compliance. Security is communal. The Mancio has guards who are mostly posture and schedule. The kaupona has eyes and rules. Packs under benches, sleepers' heads inward. One man stays sober if the company is wise. Theft is tired here. Too many witnesses, too many routines. On ugly nights, the watch from a nearby village pauses by the door, swaps a joke for a ladle of stew, and reminds the room that procedure never sleeps. Crises prove worth. In rain, the Mancio yard turns into choreography. Tarpaulins pulled tight, mangers refreshed, the clerk scratches a long note, river high, hold 2 hours, onto the board so nobody misunderstands delay for malice. In heat, the kaupona's host keeps a bowl of watered vinegar near the door and insists that men drink before they argue, saving more lives than he'll ever count. In snow, both houses become schools of patience, where children hear more stories than any winter tutor could afford, learning where Via Appia cheats a marsh and how the Valeria talks a pass into collaboration. Culture gathers here like steam. Songs pick up verses from 3 provinces and slouch toward Rome with new vowels. Recipes migrate, a Sabine trick with fennel, a Campanian respect for garum, a mountain habit of soaking barley the night before so morning doesn't steal the day. Jokes are currency. News is noise until the Mancio clerk pins it to time and place, which is how noise becomes information. At shutter time, the kaupona smells of ashes and onion. A last trencher is wiped clean. Someone plays at dice with a careful quiet that means he is less interested in luck than in company. The Mancio closes its gate and lays a lantern where it will be seen by late arrivals, but not by thieves. Out on the road, the dark is articulate. Far off, the city lays its ladders of lamplight onto the water. You can say the dependable line and feel it land. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight, and every place that promised to be open at 2nd hour will be. A campaign ends, but a life must go on. Rome's answer to the question, what now, is not charity, it is placement. Veterans are planted in fields, in workshops, in councils, so that the habits that won hills can keep streets polite. This is the Republic's second harvest, first grain, then character. The veteran returns with a kit of reflexes that look like virtues when seen from a kitchen door. He rises before work because watch hours taught him that dawn is cheap and reliable. He stacks tools along a wall because tents taught him where a thing lives matters as much as what it is. He looks at a muddy lane and sees ditches before he sees blame. He tells a child not to run near the oven, and the child somehow listens, because a voice that called a testudo into being knows how to make a sentence that fits. Land is the first instrument. Allotments in colonies or near old towns give him a strip whose rows his body already understands. Vines trained to stakes mimic palisades. Olive terraces are sieges against gravity. Grain fields are parade grounds that move under the wind. He keeps a book, not fancy but faithful, of seed, yield, repairs, and debts, and the Nundinae become his metronome. When harvest clashes with levee, he doesn't panic. He negotiates with neighbors by schedule, not by drama. Where land is scarce, craft is land under a roof. The veteran apprentice to a smith brings a wrist that already knows weight and timing. The one who joins a road gang works like a man who knows stakes are literal objects. The one who hires on at a horium lifts with legs because backs are for long wars. Discipline is not barked. It is displayed until imitation feels like self-respect. Civic roles welcome these habits. On the watch, a veteran doesn't break heads. He breaks up timelines. Lamp lit here, patrol passes there, shutters closed by this hour. As juror or iudex, he listens like a man who has stood in line under rain, patient, practical, deaf to theater. As councilman in a colony, he speaks the language of ditches and bridges and asks engineers the question they secretly love. Where does the water actually want to go? A veteran's family is the Republic's quiet beneficiary. Children grow into queues rather than crowds. Wives inherit a husband who can sharpen a knife, mend a hinge, and apologize as crisply as he gives orders, because camp taught him that every command implies a future in which you will see the same faces again. Neighbors get a man who lends a spade before he writes a speech. The aediles get a citizen who reads postings and follows them like an oath. Not everything is polished. Some men return with noise inside. Rome's medicines are simple and often sufficient. Work, routine, company. The baths wash more than sweat. Games give shouts a place to live where they won't break plates. Festivals reset the city's mood. When a veteran starts a story 3 times and can't finish it, a friend steers him toward a watch shift or a ditch crew, tasks that end cleanly and leave the chest lighter. The Republic has not written this down, it has built it. Debt is the old danger, but Poetilius's mercy, no bondage for arrears, meets the veteran halfway, and the schedule finishes the job. A man with a calendar can reschedule what would have ruined his father. The praetor's edict backs him with formulas that exchange shouting for sums. Pride survives, which is the point. Religion folds him in. He stands at the compitum and ties a garland with hands that tied better knots at the river. He thanks the lares for an honest roof. He nods at the vestal fire during games with a respect that has nothing to do with theology and everything to do with continuity. The gods of a soldier are procedures that kept holding. The city's infrastructure loves veterans. Road crews are steadier with a man who thinks in paces. Aqueduct teams are sharper with a man who treats a seep like an enemy that must be flanked. Bridge keepers trust a man who has watched a river try to lie. Names on stones become better names when men who care about names carve them. At dusk, in a small colony square, a veteran finishes tamping the last rudis around a reset milestone. He straightens, rubs lime from his hands, and looks toward the stream that pretends to be a river in this district. Children chase each other across the Cardo, counting out loud and missing numbers and laughing anyway. The veteran smiles because the count will improve. That is Rome's promise in a boyish voice. Night comes in easily. Somewhere far off, the river Tiber carries barges like arguments that have found their conclusion. You can say the sentence a soldier would approve for its clean cadence. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight, steady, unsurprised, available tomorrow. Glory is a summary. A campaign is a calendar. Watch how 30 days make the difference between a story that ends at a ditch and one that ends in a treaty. We'll walk it without theater, roads, lists, and the old Roman talent for making tomorrow look like today on purpose. Day 1-3, levy and load. The consul posts the call. Sentries report with kits inspected against a board. Shield edges sound, pilum heads firm, stakes paired. The quaestor issues grain by century. Mules are counted, their shoes checked. Wagons tagged to maniples so confusion can find a name before it becomes loss. A survey party rides ahead with a groma and a bag of stakes. Day 4-6, march and mark. The column moves in blocks, distances measured in paces to keep the line elastic. At noon halt, Fires lit to boil, posca made, grain cracked. At night, the camp lays itself down. Ditch, ramp, street, gates, the standard planted where eyes find it in fog. The survey party marks the next day's water and the place where fodder can be bought without breaking a town's back. The tabulari leave with news for Rome, stamped 6 days. Day 7:10, contact and counting. Skirmishes at a crossing test both courage and bridges. Pioneers throw a span in a day because piles were cut the week before by order of a man who had no idea he would be thanked and will not be. The first wounded are walked to the medici who wash, bind, and write notes, who can return by market day, who needs cart space, who must be written home about. A mancio clerk records late arrivals with explanations that save careers. Day 11 to 15, siege begins. The army draws a ring, ditch outward, then inward when relief seems likely. Agar rises by basket and rhythm. Towers roll forward, sheds push rams under hides that stink of life and safety. Supply thickens into routine, carts in on the 2nd and 5th days, cattle slaughtered at dusk, offal buried downwind by men who do not need to be told twice. The prefect of engineers posts a schedule for shift relief that is a poem of fairness. Day 16 to 20, diplomacy with numbers. The legate meets a city elder at the ditch and recites stocks, grain left, water drawn, days until hunger knocks on doors that belong to rich men first and then to everyone. He offers terms that taste like humility to those inside and like control to those outside. Inside, a council argues. Outside, ramps rise. A letter rides to Rome with day 18 on it and a confident guess of day 26 as an ending, because men now trust their own math. Day 21 to 24, the breach and the break. A section of wall shifts like a tired jaw. Trumpets compress air, Testudo edges forward in a small, stubborn silence. Fighting is a series of brief agreements. This ladder holds, this corner is lost, retreat here is wiser than death. Pillage is timed, hours, then horn, then stop, because victory that rots becomes defeat. The watch doubles after dark, because men are made of nerves. Day 25 to 27, settle and sequence. The praetor drafts edicts for order. Shops open on the 3rd day, prices posted, weights on pegs, graves outside the line. The aediles inspect water and hang fines like lanterns, useful and visible. The censor's deputy walks the bridge and taps piles with a hammer, because a war day is an excellent day for a river to make a fool of pride. A colony colonel is marked, 2 right-angle streets scratched on ground with a staff and an intention. Day 28 to 30, dismiss and memory. The levy starts home with shares posted. No mysteries, no grudges that outlive bruises. Tools are counted, carts repaired, promises dated. A standard is lowered with a lack of ceremony that looks like contempt and is actually self-respect. Letters arrive in Rome on day 30 as forecast. The Temple of Concord fills, not with bragging, but with names on boards. Who held a ditch, who held a line, who held their temper. What did we learn? That an army is a calendar with muscles. That roads are agreements written ahead of need. That victory is the end of correct sums rather than the result of volume. Men go home not giddy but tidy. Their wives plan washing days against the fasty. Their children learn to copy day 26 on wax as if dates were spells that work. Night falls on the emptied camp. The ground remembers ditches the way a face remembers a smile after the lips relax. Far away, the river Tiber receives the first barges of spoils, the last letters of apology, and the ordinary cargo that makes both matter less than bread. The river moves slowly, which is how you end a month well. Daylight flatters every system, night tests it. Roads that promised certainty under the sun must keep their promises under a sky that erases detail and multiplies hesitation. Rome, suspicious of luck, builds methods into the dark. Start with beacons. High points along strategic lines, ridges above the Via Appia, towers along the Via Valeria, coastal knuckles watching the Aurelia, host braziers and shuttered lamps. This is not romance, it is a code. 2 long burns and 1 short, road open, patrol east to west. 3 slow shutters, ford high, wait at Mancio. The point isn't to outwit storm or bandit with firelight heroics. It's to reduce uncertainty before men leave their beds. Uncertainty breeds panic. Information breeds patience. Next, routes for the night watch that belong to roads, not only to streets. Pair patrols leave villages with staves, horns, and orders written as plainly as market prices. They inspect culverts, the places where night likes to hide mischief, listening for the muffled rush that says blocked, marking with chalk where water climbs the road's shoulder and threatens to win. They check mile markers. If a stone leans, they stone lean with 3 hands and a grunt rather than writing a report that will be read when a cart has already overturned. They carry small oil flasks to feed lamps at posted points, because darkness is a liar, light is a fact. Carts move at night when heat or schedule demands it. Night carts get rules. Rim width is enforced because a too narrow rim carves panic into wet stone. Shoeing is required where paving begins. Loads must be roped in patterns that old men can approve by silhouette. A wagon with singing bolts finds itself turned around by 3 polite farmers and a watchman before it becomes a sermon delivered in splinters. Inns, kopane, keep a lantern on the roadside face and the price slate angled outward even after shutters close. A driver knows where and what before his mule smells hay. That small courtesy is the difference between calm and argument that wastes an hour. Banditry survives the century because hunger survives, yet it tires early where procedure lives late. Ambush points are mapped, brush is cut back a mule's length from the ditch after each growing season, and auxiliary patrols, locals under their own standards, walk stretches they know by childhood, which is another way of saying they can smell wrong. A band itching for bravery finds its stage poorly lit, its exits watched, and its audience uninterested. Rewards are posted for names, not bodies. Names break bands better than blood. The Mancio becomes a control room at night. The clerk's board shows expected arrivals with simple marks. A dot for within the hour, a bar for delayed by weather, a cross when held at a flooded ford. Couriers touching in will scratch brief notes. Drain at Sueve choked, 2 men sent, which the morning road gang reads before lifting a hammer. This is the Republic's magic. The handoff between night and day is a conversation, not a shrug. Villages adopt curfews that smell of common sense rather than tyranny. After second hour, shutters close. Noisy trades simmer down to maintenance. The watch calls its 2-syllable password at fixed corners to remind ears that somebody cares. The baker counts backwards from first light to know when to bank fires. The mill respects the rest hours the tribunes posted for households that need quiet. A woman nursing a child can tell, by the rhythm of feet and the occasional horn, whether the night is ordinary. Ordinary is the city's favorite word. Signal fires earn their keep in storm. When rivers talk themselves into depth, beacons confirm the ford boards. Red for closed, steady white for shallow but passable with ropes, dark for don't argue. At such times, the river Tiber does its old trick of becoming everyone's problem and everyone's proof. Upstream towers echo decisions downstream. Runners replace mules for short, urgent notes. Ferries are tethered high and tied twice. The river is not the enemy. Surprise is. Rome's habit is to starve surprise. Medicine has a night shift too. Litter teams shelter at mansions on hard stretches. They carry splints, vinegar, and a fold of linen that has already learned to handle blood without panic. A farmer's broken wrist on a wet descent is not a tragedy if the cart can be dragged into a yard, and a man with names on a list can blow a horn that brings help out of warm rooms. The state did not write a poem about this. It wrote posting rules and funded lanterns. There is commerce under stars, but it's the kind the city can live with. A fish runs slides along the coastal spur under basket covers, counting turns in the road by feel. At the third lamp after the salt marsh, the mule's hooves click on a small bridge, and the driver knows he is halfway to a market that will be smelling of water by dawn. A letter train passes, 2 men, 2 seals, 1 satchel each, and the Mancio clerk notes the hour as if he were a priest marking a feast. He is, in his way. When the weather is kind, night has beauties that the day cannot afford. Owls beat the air over cuttings, dew draws a paler line along the crown. Milestones become islands of certainty in a sea that refuses detail. Somewhere beyond the last hill, lamps comb long ladders onto a dark surface. Name it without poetry. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight. The phrase is a report sent down the chain, road open, city breathing, schedules safe. And so by the time first light scrapes the ditch and the road gang hefts its hammers, the night has already kept the day's promises. That is the standard. Not stories, promises kept. A network that carries carts and letters also must carry law. If a jar sold in a Samnite hill town doesn't fit a lid bought in a Latin market 2 roads away, the road has failed. If a contract drafted by a Greek notary in Neapolis can't be understood by a praetor in Rome, the road is nothing but scenery. Rome solves this not by crushing local habits, but by teaching compatibility. Begin with the 8 aisles standards. Hooked to market walls from the Po to the Straits, the official weights and measures are recognizably the same. A pound that sings, a half that knows its scar, a quarter that looks like a cousin in every town. Cities etch their own marks but keep the shapes. Clerks in different hands copy the same table of dry and liquid measures. Result: a potter in a colony sizes a neck to a diameter the oil sellers recognize, and a family can move house without buying new lids. Contracts learn to travel. The backbone is the stipulation, that paired promise formula the praetor loves. In an Oscan market, a notary will guide 2 men through Latin words, even if neither speaks Latin over dinner. The edicts, those annual boards that announce remedies, become a second highway. A merchant who knows the Aquilian action for damaged goods in Capua knows it in Calais and Tibur and Rome, because the praetor urbanus and the peregrinus coordinate their phrases like careful carpenters aligning joints. Local councils can add custom where it does not collide. They cannot invent a wheel that does not fit the axle. Servitudes, the little private rights of way, water, drip, light, are harmonized by examples. The judge's cord stretches the same 2 cubits across a footpath in Picenum as it does in Etruria. He marks eaves with the same small speech about drift and fairness. He sets hour rights on wells, with ropes hung at dawn and collected at the 4th hour for households that share. This is not an empire of edicts. It is an empire of habits. Coin is the glue that sticks all this to hands. Bronze asses pass with local faces but familiar weights. Later silver will carry more distance in less mass, and its ring becomes a shared accent. The 8 aisles, punch bites a counterfeit in iridium the way it bites in Rome, and a forger discovers that posting makes anonymity expensive. Price slates look alike. The symbols for pound, half, and quarter migrate as lovingly as kitchen gossip. Dispute resolution rides the roads, too. The formula travels by courier. If it be proven that Iudex in a colony sits under a fig and hears witnesses whose accents disagree with his own, he decides within a framework that a man a week's march away would recognize at a glance. Appeal is possible where the law allows, but rarely necessary when the first decision feels like procedural dignity. Men were heard, measures were measured, and the sum fits the harm. Religions, with their calendars, harmonize in the practical places. The fasti boards that close courts for feast days teach similar spacing because officials hate surprises. A festival might have another name in different songs, but the closed day feels the same across a road. That means a carrier can plan not just for one town's market, but for 3 in a row without hitting a shut door. Priests gain the reputation for sense, which religion requires more than incense. Where compatibility is hardest, inheritance, dowry, adoption, Rome does not force sameness so much as force clarity. Write it, witness it. Use forms that someone in Rome can read if they must. The Mancipatia, that bronze and scales ceremony, is less common in the hills, but when used, it anchors property against forgetfulness. Wills ride roads safer than their riders ride mules, because a system that loves writing loves remembering. The result is not uniformity, it is relief. A traveler knows that a loaf weighs a loaf, that a fine print's numbers where his eyes expect them, that rim width and wash-down rules will be familiar under another skyline. Women recognize the mill rest clauses in towns they have not visited before and schedule babies' naps accordingly. Veterans taking plots in distant colonies discover that the ditch rules are the same as the ones their hands already know. The road becomes a school that teaches the same class in many rooms. By evening, this legal compatibility performs its soft miracle. Letters describing a settlement, 2 coins and an apology on the same bench where the insult landed, arrive in the capital and are filed, not because Rome needs to babysit, but because Rome likes to count the number of days ordinary life continued without asking for thunder. Down on the water, barges load under lamps. You can speak the line as a docket entry, not just a comfort. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight, and every rule that needed to ride today did. Roads talk louder at their ends. Follow the Via Appia past the familiar seats of Campania, past the marshes that were taught to behave, past the stone that learned to fit, and you reach a coast where Greek vowels salt the air and harbors perform politics as easily as trade. Brundisium is not just a destination, it's a hinge. Here the pavement widens as if taking a breath before meeting the sea. Milestones have been counting down to a logic. Carts can be loaded lighter, knowing ships lie ahead. Pack trains can stop pretending to be ships and become what they are, patient legs. The road's crown takes on a salt sheen. Ditches must drink faster here because sea air and storm conspire to insult stone. Crews have learned the trick. Shell added to rudis, joints packed more often, washed down more frequent. The harbor is a double crescent that looks like a plan drawn by a patient god. Quays are stepped, ropes find rings where they should, warehouses breathe inland breezes. Greek ships with their tilting eyes on prows sidle up to Italic barges with the wary affection of cousins. Tariffs are posted in 2 scripts. Measures are kept in duplicate. One set with Greek letters for visiting captains who count in drachmae, one with Latin for clerks who tally in asses. Conversion is a table, not a quarrel. South Italy's polis, Tarentum, Regium, Neapolis have long traded in arguments and olive oil with equal verve. The road brings a different rhetoric, schedules. A promise to deliver grain by the 5th day carries more conviction than a speech about friendship. A bridge that stands after flood convinces more effectively than a delegation in white cloaks. Greeks call Rome barbarian in poems and reliable in ledgers. Rome endures the first and builds on the second. Colonies along this reach adopt Greek conveniences that Romans pretend to mock and quietly love. Stoas that shade squares, porticos that welcome rain, a better way to cite theaters so voice behaves. In return, the Greek towns adopt Roman posting, edicts where even a tired sailor can see where not to set a brazier, weights on hooks so a jar can be tested in a language both sides understand, touch. Intermarriage begins to show up in contracts as mere fact. Children learn to curse in both idioms and negotiate in numbers. Down Appia's last miles, mansions behave like embassies. A Greek proxenos, local friend of foreign states, might sit by the clerk and advise a captain when the wind sulks. A Roman officer on leave explains how the inland grid of a new colony will prevent riots by making exits work before the first drama. Over bowls scented with garum, men trade methods without calling them philosophy. The Tiber still matters here, far away as it is, because it is the other half of the sentence. Barges that kiss its quays in the capital carry letters that end their journey in a Greek hand at a Brundisian table. Contracts signed in a colony under Latin formula command respect in a Greek court because they arrive on time. Roads make promises, rivers make routes, and the sea stitches friends into neighbors with the oldest needle. At sundown, the Appia gives one last lesson. Lamps catch the bevels of stone and write a soft geometry toward the masts. Sailors coil lines, muleteers unbuckle loads, scribes add dates in 2 alphabets. A child sits on the final milestone and asks what it says. A father traces the numbers and answers in a blend of accents, and for once the explanation is easy. It says we can get there. Somewhere far to the northwest, the river Tiber moves slowly tonight, carrying a city's patience toward the sea this harbor shares. Stone, water, and salt have agreed for once on the same advice: be steady. We admire the curve of an arch and forget the men who told it what to do. The Republic's most persuasive speeches were delivered by people who rarely spoke in public. Surveyors, lime burners, stone cutters, carters, rope makers, sappers. Without their private exactness, legions would be shows and roads, suggestions. The survey crew steps out first, and everyone else learns to trust their eye. They bring the groma, stakes, colored strings, a chain that knows how much it lies when heated. Their gossip is about angles and fall and whether the boy on the far hill has finally learned to hold the rod vertical when wind nags. When they plant flags and say "here," they are staking the reputation of men they will never meet. That is why they are slow. Behind them come the men who turn rock into glue. Lime burners feed kilns with stone and brush, timing heat until limestone gives up its water and becomes quicklime that bites skin and binds worlds. They slake it, carefully, because water and quicklime are quarrelsome lovers, and carry the paste to crews who will fold it into rudis and nucleus. A road without good lime is a boast with a cough. Lime men have learned to test a batch with a tongue of wood and a whisper. The whisper tells them, not yet. Stonecutters teach mountains to accept purpose. They read the grain in basalt and tufa and decide where a wedge will split and where it will sulk. They cut polygons that will lock together like people who get along without pretending to be squares. Their pride is a joint you cannot slide a reed into. Their superstition is never to name a block until it has sat all day without wobbling. They carve names at the end, not the beginning, because stone despises premature vanity. Carters and muleteers are the sentence between quarry and site. They know which slope lies about being gentle, which ford takes a cart like a friend, which inn feeds animals before men and earns loyalty that turns into better arrival times. They carry spokes, nails, leather thongs, and the conviction that a rope can solve a surprising share of problems. If you ask them where a road is worst, they answer with a mile number. They are the living inspection reports. Rope makers rarely see the stones they help. In yards that smell of hemp and tar, they twist strands into lines that will lift blocks, bind loads, and save men from water that doesn't forgive. They test their work on frames that creak and confess. A bad rope is a public sin. When a mooring holds during flood, a rope yard many miles inland has earned quiet gratitude it will never hear. Sappers and ditchers close the chain. They cut banks, clear ditches, and persuade water to choose the path the surveyor preferred. They set fascines where mud would win, lay brush mattresses on soft subgrade, and understand that most failures are wet before they are visible. Their craft has a proverb for every kind of soil and a fix for most. The proverb you hear most often begins with never trust and ends with without a ditch. Meals bind these trades into a brotherhood that doesn't need oaths. At midday, a lime man shares vinegar water with a cutter whose lips are chalked. A sapper shows a survey boy how to read puddles after a small rain. A carter teaches a rope maker's apprentice how to judge strain by listening to a wheel. Knowledge moves sideways as eagerly as it moves down a chain of command. When a stretch opens, the public sees stone. The crews see a conversation they have been having for months, finally speak in a language everyone understands. Firmness. They pass and touch a block the way a sailor touches a mast, not worship, just recognition. A child walking home from the market steps on a new seam and does not stumble. That is the compliment that matters. Even the failure days honor the chain. A joint lifts after frost, crews gather without speeches, the surveyor checks crown, the sapper opens side drains, the lime man mixes fresh, the cutter shaves a lip, the carter fetches fill, the rope man's line lowers steadily. By dusk, the seam is humble again. Work ends with hands smelling of vinegar and stone and a satisfaction that has no audience and needs none. From a ridge, you can see how many of these conversations are happening at once. White freckles of lime pits, straight scores of new cuttings, moving dots of carts, a flicker where a rope yard dries lines in a wind that behaves, small rectangles where crews sleep. Far away, a river takes the day's fatigue toward the sea. It is not always the Tiber, but if you stand in Rome at night, you can listen to the same rhythm made wider. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight, bearing the weight of all these quiet professions and not complaining. People forget. Stones remember. Rome solves the human problem of decay, of reputation, of gratitude, of shame, by chiseling the right things where wheels polish them. A statue flatters, a milestone instructs. Names carved into parapets and abutments are not bragging, they are guarantees. A contractor who knows his letters will outlast his breath tampers less with fill. A censor who understands that a bridge plaque is a ledger page carved in basalt writes specs that sweat the details. Crown, ditch, approach, parapet height, pile depth. The city trains its elite to love stone, not just speeches. That is a moral education. Negative memory works too. The 8 Isles board holds names of cheaters and the numbers that cured them. Shaving a weight is made expensive in public. Fixing the habit is made visible. In a generation, a child staring at the board learns that the city's anger is accounted, not performed. The difference breeds citizens rather than spectators. The 12 tables, copied, recopied, and hung low enough for children, turn law into furniture. Boys trace the line about boundary stones with sticky fingers. Girls memorize the dowry clauses because their mothers made them and then use them later without drama. The fasti beside them teach the calendar. Beside that, a slate of repairs teaches how time is spent on the city's behalf. Wall space becomes a civic memory palace. Roadside funerary markers do their own work. Traveler, stop and read is less a plea than an instruction in humility. The dead say, I was like you, walking, counting, arriving, arguing about schedules. A healthy city lets grief live where commerce passes, so that men remember priorities without being preached at. Children learn to sound out names before they understand what it means to end. Both are useful. And then there are the repairs written into stone, repaired under the censors, bridge restored after flood. These aren't decorations, they are audit trails. A future crew, finding a failure, can read who chose what and when, and learn which choices age well. Accountability becomes technical literature. The road's memory even disciplines language. A poet calling a hill impossible is corrected by a ramp that exists. A demagogue calling a delay treachery is corrected by a slate that lists dates, crews, storms, weights moved, and miles set. Facts are not enemies of feeling. They are feelings with addresses. Citizens trained to look for the address become bad soil for panic. At dusk, the names on stones lose legibility and gain presence. You cannot make them out from the road, but you know they're there, and you walk straighter for it. Down on the bank, the lamps write again on water. If you need a last sentence for the day, use the one that tells the truth without help. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight. It will still be moving when this year's paint peels and next year's lime cures and some child learns to count by milestones. A straight line across land gathers custom the way a cloak gathers burrs, small, persistent, telling. Along Italy's roads, piety goes about on foot. Shrines at bends, markers where accidents taught humility, altars at hill crests where men like to pause and pretend the view is devotion. This is religion in its most useful mood. Not thunder, but manners. Start at a bend where carts slow. A squat cypress, a little pillar, wears a wreath browned by dust. Someone's son tumbled there 3 summers ago. A stonecutter carved a name. The 8 aisles allowed a niche sunk into the cutting's wall. Now muleteers lift fingers off reins like a salute, and boys, unreliably, promise to mind wheels on descents. The road smiles faintly and forgives the next small sin because a line of attention has been drawn through a place where care is cheap and tragedy dear. At river approaches Lares Vialis, the road gods share quarters with port gods and bridge spirits the way practical roommates share a shelf. A tablet reads, pay the water with a coin, pay each other with patience. You can call it superstition. It works better as a script. Men handle ropes slower, carts take turns, curses drop half their venom. The river Tiber does not mind the coin, it minds foolishness. Shrines are a hedge against both. The oath belongs here too. Traders prefer to promise under sky where witnesses multiply and no one can argue later about candles and shadows. The formula is tidy, stipulation with names and dates, sealed with a touch to a milestone or a little altar's rim. Do you promise delivery by the 3rd market day? I promise. Hands mark the moment. A notary copies 2 lines. If quarrel comes, it will be about facts, not fog. Roadside banqueting for the gods is small and edible, a heel of bread, a splash of wine, a skewer of sausage that mostly feeds men who carried it there. No priest presides unless a guild dedicates something. The dedication tablets read like minutes. Who paid, who set, who promised upkeep for 5 years. Piety becomes maintenance with poetry on it. There are boundaries where faith and order shake hands. A shrine cannot grow into an obstacle. 8 aisles mark base sizes. The ditch must still drink. The crown must still shed. Offerings must not become trash. The gods of Rome have learned to accept brooms. They are better gods for it. As dusk bruises the edges of stone, a little shrine at a summit frames the horizon with a chipped pediment. A team halts, animals blowing. Someone pours a finger of wine, names nobody loudly, and thanks everyone quietly. Down in the city, lamps ladder the water. The island takes its old, dark stance. You can say it like a closing response. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight. The little flame in its niche answers, so do we. Roads are negotiated by animals long before they are praised by poets. A network that forgets hooves, withers, windpipes, and girth galls will remember through breakdowns. Rome answers with a dispersed, practical veterinary culture. Smiths who listen to hooves, ostlers who read sweat, herbalists who carry remedies in baskets that smell of fennel and vinegar. Begin with shoes. Iron rings against stone in a rhythm well men can diagnose by ear. The smith at a wayside awning keeps sizes in neat rows. A rack of nails glints like a tidy argument. He checks frog and sole, trims wall so the ring is true, and nails with a pace that never lets fear into the animal's eye. Hot shoeing where fuel is dear gives way to cold shoeing where it isn't, but the test is the same. The first 10 paces must sound confident. The road listens and agrees. Harness is the second medicine. A breast strap sits lower for grades, higher for flats. A collar that pinches becomes a lawsuit against a man's conscience. Ostlers learn to cut padding from old cloaks, to rub vinegar into chafed places, to shift load an inch that saves a mile. A team that leans rather than lurches travels twice the distance and eats half the anger. Water is the third and most Roman medicine. Scheduled, posted, shared. Troghs after long ascents, shaded breaks at the hours when sun is rude. The Mancio clerk adds a chalk note for heat. Water at Ike's mile under oak, that saves 2 animals he will never meet. In winter, a pinch of salt in the bucket becomes policy where locals know how cold teaches animals to forget thirst. Herbs travel with herbalists, women often, their baskets debates between leaf and root. Garlic for lungs, fennel for belly wind, ground mustard to wake stiff legs, pitch ointment for cracks, honey and wine for wounds that want to sulk. They speak authority gently, walk him till sweat looks like pearls, not strings. Muleteers pretend to scoff and then obey. On bad days, mercy is a procedure. A broken cannon bone is not a speech, it is a curtain. A rope, a pole, 3 men who won't let the 4th do it alone. The body is dragged off the crown and buried where carts won't find it. A small sprig goes into the earth, habit more than priesthood. Accounts adjust, tempers settle. The road must forgive, or it is not a road. Birds serve too. Carrier doves from villas and granaries shuttle notes. Send nails, send oats, send help. Because speed is sometimes a heartbeat, not a mile. Boys learn to wrap thin slips under wings and to feed a bird that has earned its grain. Not everything rides hoof. At night in the yard, a smith cools iron in a pan that sighs. An ostler rubs a neck until the animal forgets the afternoon. A woman with herbs ties a knot the way her mother did. A boy sleeps wrapped around a halter. The river Tiber, many hours away, does its slow practice of being consistent. Roads that care for animals inherit that consistency. Law is tested at the margins, the places between towns, between intentions. A praetor's edict is a theory. A roadside quarrel is the lab. 10 small disputes show how order travels. 1. The dripping eave. A warehouse's roof sheds onto the road, icing a slope in winter. The iudex walks with cord, measures eaves against servitude rules, and orders a drip channel into the owner's land, with a fine earmarked to gravel the patch already harmed. The posting shames no one. The repair teaches everyone. 2. The aggressive bench. A stall's bench creeps into the lane by inches each month. The aedile's chalk says retreat to line, and fine per day late. The bench leaps backward overnight and stays there, because daily fines are rain that ruins bad habits. 3. The unfair ferry. A ferryman charges a double rate after dark. The praetor's formula allows a night surcharge only when beacons display Ford closed. He posts times, limits the increase, binds the ferryman's heirs to the rule, and awards a refund in coin and apology. Night stops being a hostage. 4. The overloud mill. A mill shouts through the rest hours. The owner claims flood forced a late grind. The tribunal accepts force majeure for 2 hours, not 6, and requires posting the day before where possible. The fines proceeds buy oil for lamps along that stretch, a loop closed neat. 5. The shaved weight. Oil measures at a copona ring light. An aedile hammers them true against the board, posts the host's name, halves the fine if the man keeps weights perfect for 90 days. The host becomes a zealot, and neighbors groan happily. 6. The spook team. A cart overturns at a curve. The driver blames road camber. The crew's book shows last inspection. A worn outer joint gets reset. The driver pays a token for overloading. Both facts can be true. Law is not forced to choose one when both matter. 7. The tether war. 2 barges knot their ropes on the same ring. One swings and bruises the other. The aediles mark ring order on the quay, upriver first, and paint numbers. Fighting turns into arithmetic. 8. The guild's gate. A collegium posts a gate across a lane during a feast and forgets to open it for night traffic. A fine, an edict. Rituals may occupy but not obstruct vital ways. A watchman must hold the key. Next feast, a boy in a new cloak stands there proud and useful. 9. The wrong wheel. A wagon shows up with narrow rims on freshly paved approach. The IUDEX allows passage once and compels refitting within 3 days. The workshop that widens rims posts holiday hours and makes good money on compliance. 10. The dead mule and the blame. A mule dies in harness. The owner demands compensation from the road crew for a hidden hole. The case walks, witness, measure, timelines. The hole was marked 2 days earlier. The mark was rubbed off by rain. The watch had noted it. The crew had not yet arrived. The fine falls on no man's head. The fund for contingencies covers a share. The system admits tragedy without needing a villain. Each case leaves a smudge on the praetor's edict. A clarified unless, a narrowed within, a firmer by. The city's genius is to let small law teach big order. By posting outcomes, Rome lets distant towns borrow decisions without borrowing trouble. Evening presses close. A judge walks home lighter for having turned 3 tempers into 1 compromise. Downriver, the Tiber folds itself around stairs that remember flood and keep their numbers honest. Say it again like a signature. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight. Stone and timber pay for straight lines. If you take without manners, roads become accusations. Rome develops a practical ethic for taking what it needs. Forests first. Coppice management, cut, let sprout, rotate, feeds kilns and kitchens without cutting hearts out of hills. Markers on trunks record years, felling windows close by edict in nesting times. Cart paths stay where posted to keep soil from walking downhill forever. Sawyers leave cedars, the odd parent tree spared to make shade in future. Adiles inspect erosion with a farmer's eye. Fines pay for terracing. Quarries next. A good quarry is cut like an amphitheater. Benches, ramps, drains. Spoil is stacked where it won't silt streams. Sumps catch fines. Runoff chokes nobody's field down valley. Contracts name a closure plan. Slopes trimmed, pits fenced, a shallow pond left where shepherds will thank men they will never meet. Stonecutters sign lifts, carters sign loads. Overweights pay for road patches automatically. Charcoal burns in pits lined with care. A collier knows the breath trees must give and the breath they must keep. Too much air and wood turns to ash, too little and it sulks. The product, black, light, powerful, feeds kilns and forges. The law forces colliers to burn downwind of habitations and to post days when smoke may sulk. Mothers count those days and plan linen and bread accordingly. River gravel is life for Rudis, death for banks, if stolen stupidly. Crews take in-channel only where flow will backfill, never from outer bends, and never during spawn. Tiber teaches this lesson in lawsuits if men forget. A fetial priest can probably hear the river argue from the forum when gravelmen get greedy. The ethic is not piety, it is prudence with a long calendar. A road that drains well because forest still drinks uphill costs less to keep. A bridge that stands because quarries cut smart costs fewer names when plaques are carved. Stone that wasn't stolen by speed, willing to be ashamed, arrives without curses clinging. At twilight, a lime kiln settles into its low, dragonish breathing. A hillside shows new benches like thoughtful steps. A cart creaks under legal weight. A stream crosses a road exactly where a culvert invited it. Far away, the river Tiber says the same thing it says to anyone who will listen. Be steady. It moves slowly tonight. The hills nod. The empire's most persuasive scent is bread. Behind every schedule is a cook fire that behaved. The technology is simple where it must be and ingenious where it can be. In camp, field ovens grow like mushrooms at the edge of the grid. Earth scooped, brick set, a dome improvised from tiles and clay. The heat curve is learned by hand hovering, by a pebble tossed and counting heartbeats before it hisses. Dough, coarse, honest, goes in. Loaves come out that can stand a day tied to a pack without sulking. A century that eats hot once a day is a century that turns discipline into habit rather than threat. On roads, coponi keep pots that never quite empty. Stew is a ledger. Yesterday's bone prints flavor on today's turnips. A handful of barley thickens time. A splash of vinegar floors the sour that saves stomachs. Men learn to taste for clean more than for splendor. Food safety is a posted thing. Wash down hours, no meat hung in sun after third, salt in bins and not on floors where dogs can negotiate. Markets have their own ecology. Fish must sell by second hour or surrender to pickle. Milk must be near shade and sold by measure. Men can audit with hooks. Greens sit on wetted boards that smell of river and ash. The 8 aisles boards tell when to inspect and what to expect. Sellers learn to get there before inspections do, and be proud when nothing is found except scents. Festivals stress this system in beautiful ways. Pop-up ovens appear like miracles, but are merely the result of permits handed out a month earlier and wood cut the week before by men who read the fasti as carefully as priests. Lines become lanes, carts behave, the watch drinks water where it should and keeps an eye for boiling water near children. The whole city eats without injuring itself, which is a better definition of civilization than most marble can propose. At the river, fishmongers call freight from boats to slates. Garum dealers keep lids tight and pried tighter. Porters swap nuts for favors with warehouse keepers who know when a barge will cross the stairs. Kitchens in 10,000 houses coordinate, unconsciously, on the same clock because the city posts arrivals and repairs. A burned stew is an anecdote. A burned market is a scandal. Rome prefers anecdotes. Night runs its clean towel over counters. Ovens sigh, pots snore. Someone sets sponge to stone and hums a marching song learned beside a ditch. The rhythm suits scrubbing. Down on the quay, the Tiber shouldered the day's smell hours ago and left only a cool thought. Tomorrow we'll eat. The river moves slowly tonight. Bread will rise. Stand where the Pons Fabricius meets the city, and you can feel anatomy. The Tiber Island is a carpal bone, a wrist stone, letting the city flex. 2 bridges span to either bank. Stairs bite water. Hospitals and shrines make pain and hope neighbors. In an age of roads and legions, the island is still the pivot. Engineering first. Cutwaters on both bridges split flood into manageable energy. Parapets are high because the city refuses to argue with children's curiosity. Piles were driven to refusal, and then a fraction more because future cautious men would have wanted it that way. The approaches are wide, the crown generous, and drains clever. When flood rises, the stairs' numerals speak plain to anyone. This high, not that high, and do not trust memory. Institutions next. The island holds care as the hills hold law. A sick man can be carried from any quarter to a place where clean water and practiced hands live. A priest pours a small libation in the corner and is not laughed at because everyone understands hope and method are cousins. During fevers, the island becomes a polite factory. Bedding boiled, records kept, litter teams drilled, runners dispatched to fetch kin or call a magistrate when wills need witnessing. Crowds learn to pass the island like blood, across, around, without clots. 8 aisles post directions on feast days. The watch becomes shepherd more than soldier. Vendors know where not to stand. Singers know where their notes bounce best. Lines at shrines remain lines. The bridge's lamps are serviced as carefully as a noble's atrium. Failure here is the wrong kind of history. At night, the island invents an art form, reflections braided into current, the city's lights edited by water until they look like promises. You can be sentimental if you like, the bridges don't mind. They were built to hold ordinary feet. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight, and the island, like a wrist, says, I can bear your weight, move. Stand where the Pons Fabricius meets the city and you can feel anatomy. The Tiber Island is a carpal bone, a wrist stone, letting the city flex. 2 bridges span to either bank. Stairs bite water. Hospitals and shrines make pain and hope neighbors. In an age of roads and legions, the island is still the pivot. Engineering first. Cutwaters on both bridges split flood into manageable energy. Parapets are high because the city refuses to argue with children's curiosity. Piles were driven to refusal, and then a fraction more because future cautious men would have wanted it that way. The approaches are wide, the crown generous, and drains clever. When flood rises, the stairs' numerals speak plain to anyone. This high, not that high, and do not trust memory. Institutions next. The island holds care as the hills hold law. A sick man can be carried from any quarter to a place where clean water and practiced hands live. A priest pours a small libation in the corner and is not laughed at because everyone understands hope and method are cousins. During fevers, the island becomes a polite factory. Bedding boiled, records kept, litter teams drilled, runners dispatched to fetch kin or call a magistrate when wills need witnessing. Crowds learn to pass the island like blood, across, around, without clots. 8 aisles post directions on feast days. The watch becomes shepherd more than soldier. Vendors know where not to stand. Singers know where their notes bounce best. Lines at shrines remain lines. The The bridge's lamps are serviced as carefully as a noble's atrium. Failure here is the wrong kind of history. At night, the island invents an art form, reflections braided into current, the city's lights edited by water until they look like promises. You can be sentimental if you like. The bridges don't mind. They were built to hold ordinary feet. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight, and the island, like a wrist, says, "I can bear your weight. Move." A road is only as honest as the wheels that meet it. Cartwrights, part carpenter, part metallurgist, part priest of circles, keep the Republic's promises round. Their shops smell of steam, pine, and the tempering pan where iron tires learn humility. If you want to see how Rome thinks when it's not talking, watch a wheel being born. Begin with hub and axle, the marriage that must last. The hub is heartwood, bored clean, oiled until it learns to shine, then fitted to a linchpin that no one boasts about but everyone checks. An axle that is a shade too fat burns, a shade too thin chatters, and chatter becomes shiver, and shiver becomes failure at the worst bend. The master runs a sliver of parchment between hub and axle. If it sings, the fit is nearly right. Spokes are ribs, straight-grained wood, shaved to a taper that remembers the wheel's duty to carry down and ahead. 12 is a common number, not because gods love it, but because geometry does. More spokes mean weight, fewer mean wobble. Each spoke is shouldered into a fellow segment, curved rim pieces that meet like neighbors who truly get along. Then comes the part that turns carpentry into commitment. The iron tire is made small on purpose, heated in the ring, lifted with hooks, and dropped over the wooden circle, while men move like a sentence well drilled. 3 to set, 2 to drench, 1 to scold enthusiasm out of fire. As the tire contracts, wood complains softly and then accepts discipline. A good tire sits low enough to protect the fellow, but not so proud it steals the road's temper. When the pan hisses and the steam smells like sap and metal, apprentices grin and masters pretend they are not sentimental. Rim width is policy disguised as craft. Narrow rims bite, wide rims spread weight. Magistrates post widths for paved approaches and city lanes. Cartwrights build accordingly and stamp the hub with the measure. Men who shave width to save cost learn about fines that fund repairs to the very stones their parsimony wounded. Country tracks forgive more, but the habit of correct width follows carts home like a dog. Dish, that subtle inward tilt of the wheel, makes endurance out of insult. A dished wheel resists sideways strain on slopes and in ruts. It is the cart's way of shrugging off the world's clumsiness. Cartwrights teach customers to roll a finished wheel and watch how it leans without wandering. A straight wheel is a liar. A slightly dished wheel is a friend. Axle grease is another gospel. Animal fat cut with lime, resin whispered in, sometimes a seed oil if coin allows. Too much grease attracts grit, too little invites grief. Drivers learn to carry a rag, a pin, and a small pot. You can tell the difference between a fool and a veteran by how often his hub smokes. Mansions keep tubs of vinegar, water, and a little sand for cleaning. A clean hub is a quiet one. Suspension is primitive only to men who worship springs. Romans worship distribution. Lashings that allow a bed to flex, pack arranged low and balanced, ropes crossed so that load teaches load to behave. A high center of gravity is a confession. A low one is a profession. Drivers who sing to their mules often sing to keep pace. The song also keeps the left wheel from trying the ditch before the right agrees. Brakes live in brains more than in timbers. A drag shoe, iron or wood, hooked under the rim on long descents, saves lives when men respect heat and stop to cool iron before it becomes a lie. Fresh water at the foot of slopes is not just kindness to beasts, it is kindness to bolts. The 8 aisles rest hours near mills help here incidentally. Fewer night descents mean fewer morning tales told by men missing skin. Spare parts travel. A fellow section lashed under the cart, a pouch of nails, a spare linchpin, a short lever for prying. A cart that carries its future repairs carries its owner's dignity. Inns sell standard sections for common wheel sizes. Cartwrights resist the temptation to invent peculiarities because the road punishes novelty. Compatibility is mercy. When a wheel fails, the choreography of repair looks like law in miniature. Wedges loosened, spoke eased, tire reheated if there's a forge, otherwise a temporary binding. Rawhide soaked, stretched, dried to rock, gets the load off the crown to the next manchio. No shouting honors speed. Shouting honors ego. Speed honors method. The river has its wheel cousins, capstans, windlasses, winch drums that speak the same circular language, grain in sacks rising from a barge to a quay, barrels lowered to a cellar where air is calm. Rope burns on rings say, "We know circles," and stone parapets keep their counsel. When dusk falls, carts roll home on iron that remembers fire, wood that remembers forest, and a geometry that remembers kindness. Down by the water, the mooring rings gleam where the day's ropes bit. Upstairs on the bridge, a cart rattles the way a good paragraph reads. Even, firm, never boring. You can say the city's nightly sentence and know the wheels have earned it. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight. A city's calendar is a tool, not a superstition. Rome carves the year into tasks so weather cannot pretend to be fate. Walk the 12 months as crews, farmers, rivermen, and magistrates understand them, and you hear a metronome under the noise. January is inspection. Frost finds joints that summer flattered. Road gangs carry hammers and chalk. A hollow knock marks a seam for spring lifting. Bridges get pile taps. The note that sounds like sadness is logged. In town, 8 aisles post the year's first repair slate. What, where, who, and how fines will feed the lime. February is drainage. Ditches are cut clean before thaw. Culverts are unplugged. Brush is trimmed back because water likes to pretend it was invited. Farmers repair terraces with stones the frost walked loose and lay brush mattresses on slopes soft as promises. The river is moody. Stairs wear numbers that make moody honest. March is opening. Roads wake fully. Mansions restock. The watch rehearses beacon codes for flood and ford. Sappers walk upstream of towns and scratch inlets for future irrigation. Fields drink plow and seed. Teams learn again the song of straight. The censors begin to let contracts that must start as soon as Earth will tolerate men's ambitions. April is surface. Stone sets better with a little warmth. Gangs lift, pack rootus, reset the nucleus, and bed the top course with a satisfaction that sounds like a hand on a table. In orchards, grafts are tied. In vineyards, stakes are driven. Mills spin faster but obey rest hours because babies sleep in April as if the gods wrote the rule. May is approach work, paving before bridges, parapet repairs, waymarkers set. Farmers go to weeds with a light fury. Shepherds wash fleece for summer shearing. The river grows reasonable. Barges multiply. The harbor master's slate turns into a chorus of arrivals. Adels schedule market inspections earlier because warm meat is a gossip with teeth. June is long, light, and road edges. Crews cut verges so sightlines stay honest. Stones that migrated onto the crown are swept back to ditches. The watch posts heat advisories. Water at certain miles, midday travel discouraged between 3rd and 5th hours for beasts. The fields learn patience. Grain heads fatten under small winds. Men learn to walk slow. July is dust and discipline. Wheels throw powder. Joints creak. Watermen descend into pute, aqueduct shafts, to check seep before summer drinks too hard. At night, the city opens lungs. Baths busy. Theaters kind. A bad manager burns out his crew. A good one rotates shade and task. The river runs a little low, exposing ring scars on quays like summer's tattoos. August is the first harvest in many places, barley earlier, wheat later. Carts find their best selves, wheelwrights go to where breakage is likeliest. Roads carry sheaves in a parade that pretends not to be holy. 8 aisles extend market hours slightly to keep bread steady and tempers soft. The city sleeps lighter, laughs louder, forgives easier. September is vintage. Vines surrender to hands and knives. Presses grunt. Carts leak purple. Roads with crowns that shed properly don't drown in the festival. Roads cut cheap confess with stains and delays. The watch keeps boys off piles of must that smell like mischief. Praetors write edicts about trespass that include mercy for madness this 1 month. October is repair after glory. Ruts patched, stairs scrubbed, horia aired, weights recalibrated after a season of temptation. Farmers sow winter grain in fields that can bear it. Shepherds come down to lower pasture. The river remembers its volume. Beacons rehearse again for flood. Rope makers brace for mooring season. November is closing. Ditches are deepened one last handspan. Culverts tested with thrown water. The Fasti studied to plan winter works so crews have pay and roads have spring. Mills post winter hours. Market stalls invent awnings that the 8 aisles bless if they don't steal air or light. December is house and ledger. Crews mend tools. Cartwrights remake wheels in warm shops. The city eats steady thanks to stores placed well in June. Festivals invert pressure and throw it into jokes. The Temple of Concord hosts public thanks that are mostly lists. Bridges that stood, contracts that finished, fines that fixed, names that deserve to be remembered without marble. The year is a wheel: inspection, clearance, opening, surface approach, edges, discipline, harvest, vintage, repair, closing, rest. It turns, the road under it survives because men refuse to pretend weather is random. You can stand at the river in any month and hear the same steady syllable: patience. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight, and the year moves like it, deliberate, unsurprised, dependable. Conquest is the loud chapter. Administration is the book. Once hills stop throwing spears, Rome throws clerks. The census is not just about heads, it is about habits. Who can serve, who owes grain, who owns fields, who needs roads. Numbers turn victory into a schedule. Censors send deputies on circuits. Call them tours, call them assizes, call them the Republic's traveling questions. They carry forms, property described in comfortable units, family structures written in phrases the law can hold, oaths that are not theater but enrollment in common duties. A village that once answered only to itself learns to speak in weights, distances, dates. That language turns we from a brag into a plan. Courts travel too. A praetor or his delegate sits under a portico in a new town and posts the edict that will be used. Petitioners arrive with accents and documents. The usher puts names in order. A man complains about a servitude, a footpath across his neighbor's vines. The judge measures 2 cubits and sets hours for passage. The neighbor grumbles and obeys, because the measure fits the law he has seen in other places. Predictability is the Republic's mercy. Taxes are made visible. A road improvement levy is posted at the Mancio. This much per cart, this much per drove. Exemptions on feast days for pilgrims. Reductions in lean years by a formula that keeps collection from becoming punishment. The same board lists spend. Miles paved, stones bought, crews paid. Men argue less with numbers they can finger. Military levies are folded into civilian habit. A town is told how many men of which age will muster on which day at which road marker. This robs panic of its favorite friend, surprise. When the levy ends, names are checked against returns, and missing men are not automatically villains. They may be dead, sick, misdirected. The assumption of competence breeds cooperation. Messages move on timetables that become custom. A colony learns that Rome Day, the day the courier is expected, is Nundine +1. The clerk has copies ready, the aedile has slate space, the council has chairs. Decisions get made because paper arrives on time. The Mancio book turns into a civic pulse. When unrest or flood delays the rider, the town adjusts and no one invents conspiracies. Public works are layered into careers. A promising young local becomes curator of roads for his district, with report days that match the censor's calendar. A water warden keeps keys to Castella and learns to write flow and loss in a hand the aediles can love. A grain clerk in a river town graduates to Ostia and then to Rome, carrying skills upward the way barges carry sacks. Administration promises mobility to men who prefer facts to favor. Language follows lines of work. The Latin of clauses unless within by roots in towns where Greek songs still lead festivals. An Oscan father hears his child recite stipulatio play acting and smiles because the sound is foreign, the function familiar, promises that stick. In a generation, a village that once flattered strangers with oratory flatters them with schedules. When disputes rise to politics, roads again carry the cure. Delegations travel quickly, not because speed is a virtue, but because long uncertainty is a poison. An audience in Rome is booked, the Temple of Concord hosts talk, priests mark fit days, scribes minute, magistrates propose edicts that put quarrels onto rails. The return journey is shorter in feeling because outcome rides with it. This quiet machinery is why Rome's empire begins to look less like domination and more like confluence, streams joining a large river that is content to move slowly, broadly, and with enough patience to persuade stones to smooth. On some evenings, you can stand at a colonial bridge and pretend you are in Rome because the lamps, the stairs, the boards, the watch push the same kindness outward. Back in the capital, the river Tiber accepts the day's paperwork turned into action. Grain unloaded because a tariff was published, a bridge passable because a name was carved with care, a levy quietly met because dates were posted. You can state it as an administrative truth, not just a bedtime comfort. The river Tiber moves slowly tonight, and the Republic prefers it that way. Take a single convoy, 8 carts, 12 mules, 24 backs, 3 letters with seals, 2 crates of tools, 20 sacks of grain, 4 jars of oil, 1 grandmother with a shawl and opinions, and walk it from a hill colony to Rome. Not a parade, a normal day. Watch how every habit we have learned holds the line. Hour 0 before dawn. Lamps hooded, the yard chalked with loads. The foreman reads the board. Ford passable, Mancio kitchen open, inspection at mile 6 for repairs. Wheels are tapped, hubs greased thin, straps checked by touch in the dark. A boy recites weights from memory and is corrected once, gently. A woman tucks a letter into her shawl. It carries family news and a request for a dowry clause. She has a name for the notary at the far end. Hour 1-2. The convoy takes the crown in silence, mules blowing fog. At the first bend, a shrine's lamp glows. Drivers lift fingers in that half-salute the road has taught them. The island of light makes the curve predictable. A watch pair passes in the other direction, calling the 2-syllable password. Their horn stays asleep. Hour 3. First halt at a stone that says 3. Water for animals, a cup of pasca for men. Straps shifted a finger's width because a strap that never moves kills skin. The foreman copies a posting at the milestone. Bridge parapet repairs at mile V, narrow for 1 hour after sunrise. He scratches the note on a shard and passes it back. Routine is contagious. Hour 4-5. Descent to the river branch that is only a cousin of the Tiber. A fisher calls depth from a stump and points at the numerals on stairs. They match the beacon up the ridge. Crossings done without speeches are the convoy's favorite kind. A wheel nicks a stone. The driver curses himself, then thanks the parapet aloud because men who see good work often talk to it. Hour 6. The Mancio yard opens its arms. Troughs shaded. A boy with a board ticks arrival and due with almost priestly dignity. A smith helps wedge a loose fellow and refuses coin. Put it in the poor box. I hit it wrong last week and the road taught me courtesy. The kitchen lays out bread, onion, cheese, a spoon of stew for those who choose. The price slate is dull on purpose. A courier comes through with 2 seals and the clerk changes a chalk mark for a tower keeper downstream. Hour 7-9. The road climbs. The sun burns off the damp. A herbalist walking the verge waves the convoy down for 5 minutes and rubs vinegar into a girth gall that not even pride can argue with. She sells a packet of fennel for a mule with wind. The foreman writes her name on a slate he keeps. People who save the day. It's a long list. Good lists are long. Hour 10. Repair gang ahead at mile 6. Hammers ring. A runner stops the convoy with a palm raised and a smile that says, "We're all on the same team." The crown is half open. Carts file the shoulder under a posted walking order. Drivers read it without needing to be taught how. The gang chief's name is chalked on a board. Complaints have destinations, which turns them into suggestions. Hour 11 to 12. Heat now. The foreman calls a long halt under 2 elms that generations did not cut because someone wrote, "Rest here" on an old board and custom turned into shade. Men sleep because the system allows it. A sleeping man is less likely to be angry later. Animals drowse. Kids in a nearby field throw pebbles at a milestone and learn how numbers feel when they ring. Hour 13 to 14. Back on the crown. A caupona flashes its price slate at the road like a promise. A weight is tested. It sings true. The host nods once and keeps ladling. A peddler tries to sell pins that are a shade light. A regular at the table coughs, and the transaction modifies itself into fairness without a magistrate discovering his importance. Hour 15. A small accident. A mule steps wrong, goes to a knee, stands with shame. No tragedy. Vinegar, a hand under the belly strap, a pole under the axle while a wedge is reset. The foreman has learned to use quiet as a tool. Within 10 minutes they move, slower, kinder. Hour 16 to 17. The watch picks up the convoy for the last ridge, pairs shadowing the line as sunset threatens confusion. Beacons speak steady up the valley. A scribble on a slate at the Mancio tells the clerk they will come late but whole. The woman with the shawl practices the sentence that will open her dowry conversation. She says the date out loud because dates protect daughters. Hour 18. The first sight of the bridges, twin ribs across water, parapets already jeweled with lamps. The island sits like a wrist bone. Traffic is ordered. Carts to the right, pedestrians left, animals on leads, no stalls on the span. A singer tries a note and then stops because the watch shakes his head like a father. Everyone prefers a bridge that behaves to an area that doesn't. Hour 19. Quays. Mooring rings bite. Porters with backs like truthful arguments shoulder sacks. 8 aisles boards list arrivals, weights, prices. Names ring with the dull glory of having done what they said they would. A money changer counts without nerves. A fishmonger closes early because his slate promised and he kept it. Hour 20:22. Unloading and paper. Receipts are stipulation in miniature, delivered by the 4th hour of night, received in sound condition, 2 sacks light, replaced from reserve. A notary writes, the woman with the shawl finds him, the dowry clause is drafted in 5 lines, she reads them slowly, nods, seals and leaves with more sleep in her chest. Hour 23:24. The convoy eats, not like heroes, but like men who have made time behave for a day. Beds in the Mancio for some, pallets in the Caupona loft for others, 1 cart left as a table where boys draw lines in flour and pretend they are roads. Outside, the river Tiber shouldered the day's traffic and kept enough patience for the night's peace. Say the line as a receipt, stamped and signed, the river Tiber moves slowly tonight. The day balanced. The road kept its word. The legions that taught the system stand somewhere far off doing the same thing, turning distance into days, anger into edicts, chance into schedule. Italy remains one, not by shock, but by method. And with that, we've come to the end of this episode. If you'd like more calm history when you wake, or to keep you company while you drift, follow the full series playlist and subscribe so the next episode is waiting for you.